Okay, thank you, Mo. Right. Good evening. I'm Councillor Clive English, the Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this remote meeting of the committee. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anyone else be intending to record the proceedings? I ask this not in order to stop anyone, but simply so that we know if this will be occurring. I will take no indication as an illustration that no one is intending to do that. So no, will therefore proceed to explain how the meeting will be conducted this evening. My role as the chairman will continue, but a Democratic Services Officer and a legal representative will assist me in implementing the remote meeting protocols. The Democratic Services Officer will also produce the minutes and provide procedural advice as may be required. Instead of public speaking, members of the public have been invited to submit written statements to be read out by me as chairman, or videos to be played in the appropriate speaker slot. We have quite a few statements to be read out, but no videos to be played this evening. I will provide further explanations as we proceed throughout the agenda, but members are reminded at this point that instant messaging will be visible to those viewing the meeting and should only be used for raising technical issues, indicating a wish to speak, raising a point of order, or seconding a motion. I will now ask the Democratic Services Officer to take the attendance register by reading out the list of committee members in alphabetical order. Members should confirm their attendance by answering present. Mrs. Snook, can I now ask you to read out the list?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I'll now take the register. Councillor Atkinson.
Present.
Councillor Brindle.
Present.
Councillor English.
Present.
Councillor Eves. We'll come back in a moment. Councillor Harwood. Councillor Harwood. I think he's here on an external network. Councillor
I'll have to
Harwood.
come back to that in a minute.
Okay. Councillor Kimantz.
Present.
Councillor Mumford.
Present.
Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Debbie, Councillor Young is substituting for Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Present.
Councillor Powell.
Present.
Councillor Spooner.
Present.
Councillor Bizard.
Present.
Councillor Wilby. So we don't see Councillor Wilby here. And we have Councillor Wendy Young here, substituting for Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Yes, I can see Tony's icon on there, but he's not saying anything. Are you with us yet, Councillor Harwood? No. Maybe he'll join us yet. Could you now read out the list of officers present and which items they are presenting as appropriate, Mrs. Snook?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Rather a lot of officers here this evening. We have Kate Altieri, Senior Planning Officer for items 16 and 18. James Bailey, Development Manager for items 12, 14 and 25. Russell Fitzpatrick, Planning Team Leader, Mid-Kent Legal Services. William Fletcher, Planning Officer, items 17, 20 and 21. Nick Gallivan, Landscape Officer for item 24. Michelle Kwok, Planning Officer for item 19. Austin Mackey, Major Projects Manager. Tony Ryan, Development Team Leader, item 22. Me, Debbie Snook, Democratic Services Officer. Richard Timms, Principal Planning Officer for item 15. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Snook. Right, we move on to item 1, apologies. Can I ask you to read out the list of apologies received, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The apology that I'm aware of is from Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
And we have had no other apologies?
No, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now move to substitute members. Are there any substitute members other than the one we've already been notified as Wendy Young for Councillor Parfitt-Reid? Any other substitutes? No. Item 3 then, visiting members, can I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the names of visiting members along with the agenda items they have indicated they wish to speak on?
Thank you, Chairman. We have Councillor Bryce has indicated that she wishes to make representations on item 15. Councillor David Burton wishes to speak on item 16. And Councillor Pearl wishes to speak on, just bear with me a second, item 19. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. Item 4, items withdrawn from the agenda. I'm told that land south of Barton Road, Staplehurst, is being withdrawn by the applicant. Is that correct, Mr. Bailey?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we had that notification this morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 5, date of adjourned meeting. Given the heavy nature of the agenda this evening, it's quite possible that there will be an adjourned meeting. And if this is necessary, it will take place next Thursday on the 3rd of December 2020, commencing at 6 p.m. in the evening. Item 6, urgent updates. It's my intention to take the urgent update reports in relation to agenda items 15 and 16 together with any verbal updates as urgent items, as they contain further information relating to the applications to be considered tonight. Is that agreed, members? I will take an absence of contrary indications as agreement. And just noting at this point, if you haven't seen it, Mrs. Snook, that Tony Harwood has indicated in the IM that he is present, but he's having problems speaking, but he can actually hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I switched it on and switched it back off and back on again. So
that usually works in most cases. Okay, we move on to item 7, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures? We'll take members first. Not seeing any. Any disclosures by officers? I'll take that as a no. Oh, Councillor Perry, is that an indication you wanting to speak on the next item, or is that an indication?
It's an indication. It's to do with the first item up, which is Holman House. The last time this was discussed, I was a visiting member and I did speak on it, but I am approaching this with a completely new look, and obviously I've read the new working paper very closely, and I haven't been involved in any discussions with the parish council, so I intend to speak and vote on this particular item. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
And also, Chairman, Tony Harwood, in relation to item 24, land near 87 Lombardy Drive, I need to declare that I'm a member of Oxley Parish, but I've taken no part in any discussions around this TPO application and therefore intend to speak and vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, one more.
Councillor Mumford.
Item 20, member of Bolton and Chelsea Parish Council, take no part in their planning decisions, and I will speak and vote.
Thank you very much indeed.
Councillor English, it's Anne Brindle here.
Yes.
I need to declare that I too am a member of Boxley Parish Council. I will not be taking part in item 24 as I'm a member of the Planning or Environment Committee that deals with planning.
Okay, fine. Completely different situation than Councillor Harwood then. Thank you very much for the clarification. We move on then to item 8, disclosures of lobbying, and we will take this in the now new way of doing it and go through members alphabetically. If I can have the roll call, please, and declare any items that you have been lobbied on the agenda, please. But only if you have been lobbied, otherwise don't say anything.
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, if you could tell me which items you've been lobbied on, I'll do you alphabetically. Councillor Atkinson.
Okay, I've been lobbied on 15, 16 and 18.
Thank you. Councillor Brindle. Councillor Brindle, have you been lobbied?
Oh, sorry, that well-known Olympic sport I was in then. 15 through to 22.
Thank you. Councillor English.
15 to 18 inclusive.
Thank you. Has Councillor Eaves joined the meeting? I don't see him there. Councillor Harwood, have you been lobbied?
I haven't. Well, I probably have, but I haven't got access to my embassy system at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kimantz.
Yeah, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20 and 22.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford.
Mine's 15 to 18, 20, and I'm declaring that I was part of the working group on 14.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Yes, I've been lobbied on 15 and 16.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Items 13, 14, 15, 16 and 18.
Thank you. Councillor Spooner.
15, 16 and 18.
Thank you. Councillor Vizard.
15 to 18 and 20.
Thank you. Do we have Councillor Wilby here?
Yes, you do.
Yes, he's here. Thank you. When did you come in? We didn't see you.
Just a couple of minutes ago. So I had some IT issues. I've been lobbied on 15 to 22.
Okay. Did you have any disclosures of interest at all?
None at all.
No. Okay. Were you here at that point, or did you just come in at that point?
I just came in at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Councillor Young.
Oh, hello. Yes, I was lobbied on 15, 16 and 18.
Thank you. That concludes the lobbying. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. We move now to item 9 to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. There isn't any, as I therefore intend to take all of the items on the agenda in public this evening. Item 10, minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of October. These have been circulated. Are those minutes agreed, or are there any significant amendments that members wish to make? If I don't see any indications, well, I assume that those minutes are accurate and I can assign them in due course. Okay. Item 11, presentation of petitions. There are no petitions that I've been notified of this evening. So we move on to item 12, deferred items. Mr. Bailey, is there any update on deferred items?
I've got no update, Mr. Chairman.
Other than that, which sort of follows from them being on the agenda this evening?
Correct, yes.
So we move on to item 13, which is a one which will basically concern half of the committee, well, just under half, and that is because of the change of membership of the Conservative members on the committee. Welcome back, Councillor Perry. It's very well hard to keep you off this committee. Welcome back. There is a need to realign the members on the Pilgrims Retreat steering group, and particularly to appoint a political group representative from the Conservative group to that working group. Over to you, Councillor Perry, and Councillor Spooner. Can you tell me what you're going to do with that? Councillor Perry or Spooner, I can't deal with this one. I need a Conservative representative to tell me who you're going to nominate.
Well, if John isn't there, I mean, I'm quite happy to propose Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Yeah, I was going to support that as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's down to your group, and therefore that is going, unless someone else in your group disagrees, that's acceptable. Right, we now move on to the planning applications for this evening. We'll have an update on Pilgrims Retreat later, and we move to the first application this evening, which is item 15, which is on page 23 of your agenda, and I ask the officer to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, members. So this is the planning application for the conversion and extension of Holman House existing property into 10 flats, and the item was deferred at the committee meeting of the 1st of October. Members raised a number of questions to which the applicant has responded and which I'll run through in the slides. So firstly, with regards to biodiversity enhancements and retention of the hedge at the front, the applicant is proposing to improve the front hedge with new native species, as you can see here, and then continue this around the perimeter of the front garden, and the wall that was previously proposed at the front, that's removed so that the hedge forms the boundary treatment. Members will also see from this slide that there's a refuse storage area. That's right at the front entrance, and bins will be stored there and can be collected by refuse operatives, and there'll be no requirement for the pavement or the driveway to be blocked, which was another issue that was raised. Turning to the rear of the site, other biodiversity enhancements are proposed in the form of a new native hedgerow along the north boundary here, and there's a sort of 1 metre deep hedgerow that will run around the remainder of the site, and 2 new native trees are proposed in the communal garden space. As before, bird, bee and bat habitat will be incorporated both within the landscaping and the built fabric of the building. Now, this plan also identifies that all of the parking spaces at the rear will be provided with passive electrical vehicle charging, but condition 2 secures that 2 of those are provided from the outset. As outlined in the report, the parking spaces are slightly oversized from the standards in order to allow vehicles to manoeuvre more easily. And also here, there's an enlarged cycle store from before, which will provide 2 cycle spaces per property. The acoustic fence was another issue, the location of that, and as outlined in the report, the applicants confirm that if necessary, i.e. it can't be put on the boundary line and agreed with the neighbouring property, the acoustic fence could be installed just inside the neighbour's fence without compromising either the access width or the landscaping that's proposed there. Turning to the design treatment of the windows to the rear, which was another reason for deferral. This photograph here is showing the relationship with the neighbouring property to the north. Members will note that in common with other properties, with other neighbouring properties, they all have windows at first floor level which look down their respective gardens. As you can see, the existing property has a number of windows already at first floor level, and I draw attention to this one here on the right as a number of changes are now proposed. This plan shows that the existing window that's here, that would be removed, and the new window, or replacement window, would be slightly further away from the neighbouring property. Now, in the scheme which came to committee last time, this window would have served a living room, but the layout has now been switched so that it is back to a bedroom, which is the existing use. So it's considered the current proposal marks an improvement on the scheme that was before members previously, and also an improvement on the current situation at first floor level because the window is moving further away. At second floor level, this window would also serve a bedroom, and it's been redesigned so that this part on the right is fully obscure glazed, and on the left hand side the glass will be set back slightly so that would direct views down the garden. This photograph hopefully is useful, and I think it's important to say members no doubt are aware that it's only the immediate area to the rear of one's house that can be protected in planning decisions, and hopefully this image helps show how the rear elevation of the existing building is in line with the rearmost part of the neighbouring building, and moreover that's clear on all the plans. Now, because of this, there would be no unacceptable overlooking of the area immediately to the rear from the first or the second floor windows. And at first floor level, as I've said, it would have less of an impact than the current situation and the previously approved scheme for 7 units. Members also asked for a revised internal layout, and this has been carried out to ensure the proposals comply with national space standards, although as we know that's not mandatory. Members also sought clarity on the suitability of the units for the elderly or disabled. As the report highlights, there are 4 ground floor units with level access. 2 of the parking spaces can be adapted to suit accessibility needs if required. And finally, the applicant is agreeable to solar PV provision, and this is shown on the plans and secured by condition. So in summary, it's considered the applicant has responded to all the deferral points raised, and officers remain of the view that this is a good quality design that will not cause any harm to the local area or any unacceptable impact upon the amenities of neighbouring properties in accordance with all relevant policies. In terms of updates, there's an urgent update from Tuesday. We've had some representations since that time, but they don't raise any new issues or matters that are not planning considerations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timms. I have had a number of indications from speakers, and the first speaker I have is a Ms. Riva, who is an objector. We are disappointed that once again approval is being sought to overdevelop the Holman House site. We were, however, pleased to witness that the committee previously commented on the over-intensification of the site and the negative consequences of the proposal for our neighbouring family home to use. Our latest proposal includes some minor amendments which attempt to address the loss of privacy and overlooking the issues we raised at the previous meeting. However, in reality, these amendments do little to distract from the obvious impact of an additional floor and 3 new units. Moving the closest first floor window so it is partially obscured, and setting one top floor window back 20 centimetres does not alter the fact that the additional floor and other new windows will dominate and overlook our garden. When viewing the annotated photograph, we would ask the committee members to also keep in mind the proposed additional floor. Furthermore, as previously raised, there will be added noise and traffic impact from the additional 3 units. This level of development is simply inappropriate for the space, and cramming in 3 more flats can only result in further access and parking issues and over-intensification of the site. The latest proposal indicates a potential alternative location for the acoustic fence. Why is this only a potential? As the existing fence belongs to the use, surely the acoustic fence must be located on land owned by Holman House. This should be clarified and confirmed. In conclusion, it cannot be disputed that this proposal will have a negative impact on amenity at the use, as anyone who has visited the site will be well aware. It was a huge disappointment that approval was granted for the first level of development. We trust and hope that this extended proposal will be deemed unacceptable. Moving on, we then have a statement from Staplehurst Parish Council. The Parish Council would like to emphasise that these 10 flats, comprising of 4 2-bedrooms and 6 1-bedrooms, will mean that potentially 28 people could live in this house. Station Road is the main village route with attractive hedges, front gardens and trees, the buildings comprising predominantly of family homes and bungalows. Private outdoor space is only provided for 3 of the ground floor flats, leaving 7 flats with none, and so is contrary to the Maidstone Building for Life 12 document of 2018. The single width access drive, especially with a second acoustic boundary fence shared with pedestrians, is inadequate in safety terms, and there will be conflicts of access to and egress from the site. We are concerned that the living room of flat 1 has a door exiting directly into the drive at the front of the building, just where a vehicle may be making a blind reversing manoeuvre. The traffic along the driveway will have a significant noise, light and air pollution impact on the neighbour despite the additional fencing. The site is very stark and the application should protect and enhance biodiversity as stated in Policy DM1 Section 8. The front hedge is essential in the interest of biodiversity and will help in the absorption of fumes and noise from the busy road. Councillors expressed concern that development would exacerbate the known drainage problems in the area, especially as a shared drainage system with the adjoining property. We note that there are now 4 large shared waste bins, but being sited in the front garden is neither attractive nor healthy for passing pedestrians. My neighbour's garden is lower than the Holman house site, and any windows overlooking must be fully obscured. A large number of residents living on the plot will increase noise and disturbance to the surrounding neighbours, and councillors also noted the detailed comments from the police regarding the security of the flats for future occupants. Councillors felt that the proposed development contravened local plan policies DM1, Principles of Good Design, DM9, Residential Extensions, Conversions and Redevelopment in the built-up area, and DM11, Residential Garden Land, and felt it contravened the current 2009 NBC Residential Extension Supplementary Planning Document, paragraphs 4.75 and 76, overshadowing and loss of light, and paragraph 4.79 outlook. The site already has permission for 7 flats, and the parish council considered that number was over-intensive for the site, and increasing to 10 is totally unacceptable. Please therefore refuse this application. And then we come to a statement by the applicant's agent. Members, since the application was deferred, we have made a number of amendments and provided requested clarifications set out in details in the report to committee. On the matter of overlooking specifically, officers conclude that with the design amendments, which include either permanently obscuring or completely removing the 3 most sensitively positioned existing windows, the proposal represents a material benefit for the neighbour when compared to either the existing situation or the approved fallback. On the matter of traffic movements, while 1 additional car will utilise the existing access when compared with the existing consent, this is still significantly fewer vehicle movements than might be associated with the current and historical commercial use of the building. With the proposed mitigation measures in place, this proposal will again provide a material benefit to the neighbour. Whilst the benefits to the neighbour may be marginal, the benefits to the village and occupiers are significant. In terms of appearance, the redesigned roof form and authentic materials will bring the building to the scale of those on either side and help the building to better contribute to its surroundings. In terms of environmental impact, proximity to the station, provision for every resident to access electrical vehicle charging, and storage for 20 bicycles will allow residents to minimise the impact of their journeys on the village and on the planet. The optimised use of sustainably located existing buildings is one of the keys to preserving the rural landscape, so there are habitat and biodiversity benefits both on site and elsewhere. But most importantly, the accommodation offered within the development is in chronically short supply in the village. Young people, downsizers and those of more advanced years want to live in practical, accessible, affordable homes from which they can walk to transport and amenities. A small number of concerned local residents have made their voices heard during the application process. However, a far greater number of Staplehurst residents gave democratic voice to their concerns during the formation of the local village plan. Their voice is clear. They do not have the homes that they need where they need them. This application is fully compliant with both the aims and specifics of policies at all levels, and we ask that members support the officer's recommendation and grant consent. We turn now to Councillor Bryce, who has indicated that she wishes to speak on this application. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Here we are again. I'll kind of cut to the chase a little bit on this one because I know many of you sat at the previous application. I think you can see from the Parish Council's detailed note that there are still many concerns with this application. One of the main arguments of this application versus the previously granted application is this extra level of this extra story and the volume of residents and cars that it will therefore lead to. I think my main concern is if I look at DM1, policy DM1 of our local plan and point 4, and we say that we should respect the immunities of occupiers of neighbouring properties, and we shouldn't allow development that results in additional vehicle vehicular movements, overlooking or visual intrusion. And I think the overriding concern was that by establishing a third story, this does mean that the property next door and also the neighbour further along will be overlooked. And my concern is that you can take away a window or move it a matter of centimetres, or you can screen it. But, you know, still people can look out of their windows. Just because it's a bedroom, not a living room, doesn't mean that people won't look out of their bedroom window. And I think that those are the points that you really need to consider. I have concerns about the disparity between what the neighbour was saying and what the applicant was saying, and I don't know if that's just me mishearing. So if you can just drill down into this issue around where is that acoustic fence going to sit, because that's obviously going to be key if you do decide to grant the planning permission. So I think that needs to be there. I just picked up on a discrepancy, but I may have misheard. So it's the overlooking and the loss of privacy that I think are the key issues. And while there are no fixed standards as to what is or isn't an unacceptable impact, much depends on the density and the pattern of housing in the area. It is clear that this is a very different profile of housing as to what is in this area. And it's clear that the number of vehicle movements, that the amount of housing that's going in here, the number of windows that will be associated with this property could very well lead to a loss of amenity and a loss of privacy for the neighbour. And I've tried to look at the plans in detail, but the officer's there and he can answer your questions more fully than me looking at the plan. It's the flank of the building and that back of the building that I think I have real concerns over. Thank you very much for listening, members, and for your consideration tonight.
Well, thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Perry, this is in your ward, so let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I am coming to this afresh, and I've reread the old report, and I've re-looked at obviously had a close look at the new report, and this is a long-standing issue. But when I read the working paper, and I do see there are some improvements, but they don't do a lot, quite frankly. And when I compare the paper, what was previously presented, many of the key issues just haven't been resolved. I'd just like to concentrate on just 5 very specific items. Some have already been raised, but the privacy of neighbours is incredibly important. This is a very serious concern being raised by a number of neighbours and seems to have been dismissed in the report. Yet anyone who knows this site will know that the latest proposal does not alleviate this matter at all. There is a bit of alleviation, but very, very little. And I think it is actually, as already been said by Councillor Bryce, that it's against policy DM1(4) of the local plan. And a few minor changes to the windows will just not suffice, quite frankly. And changing from a living room to a bedroom, I don't see how that resolves the privacy issue one little bit, actually. And as has already been mentioned, a whole new floor is being added. You just can't get away from that. This is a major change, and there's going to be a major increase in the occupancy of this building. So it does contravene policy DM4 clearly, in my view. The parking has already been spoken about a lot, but there's going to be a huge number of cars. This is a rural area. I know they make great play about cycling, but quite frankly, it's irrelevant in this particular case. And I think you should dismiss any thoughts of that, quite frankly. The original planning appeal was for 7 flats, and now it's gone to 10, and I'd like to know why that is, quite frankly. It seems to be an incredible increase. And again, I think this whole development contravenes policy DM9 and DM11, which has already been mentioned as well. The other issue is the street scene itself. This is made up primarily of family houses and bungalows, and it's also the main gateway to the village from the north. So that's very important, and I believe this is not in line with policy GW1 of our neighbourhood plan. And again, policy DM11 comes into play. It's not in keeping with the other properties in the street at all. It's completely different. Now, there's one statement made by the applicant I totally disagree, and it clearly, in my view, shows that the applicant doesn't really understand our village at all. There are a lot of starter homes in our village, a lot. We don't need any more, quite frankly. And there's a lot of available for rent or for purchase. And we already have 650 houses currently being built in our village, and we've got a 5-year housing supply. We don't need anything like this in the village at all. The other big issue I have is drainage. And this is something that's not been raised at all. Or if it has, it's been on a very low level. There's a major foul water sewer that goes through this site. And this has already been raised by Southern Water as a potential issue and problem. And in the last few weeks, we've had major issues with our sewers in Staplehurst, which has brought Southern Water in. And you'll notice that one item on this agenda tonight has been withdrawn. I thought that is one of the reasons. There's going to be a major survey of all the drainage, and particularly the drainage in the Marden Road, which is very close to where this property is actually, will be carried out by Southern Water, because there's a major problem with the mixing of surface water and foul water drainage that could cause real problems. So for all these reasons, I think this is a very bad proposal. It's terrible intensification of a site, quite frankly. I know we've had planning approval for 7. I can't see any reason why this has to be increased even more. It will bring major issues and I think it must be refused. Thank you.
What you have to bear in mind with considering this application is, much though some people might not like it, is you have to compare what's being asked with what's already permitted. So whether one likes it or not, you're not talking about 10 units from scratch. You're talking about the increase from 7 to 10, which may still be considered an intensification, but it's a lesser intensification. And when you're looking at the highway issue, you have to consider what the original use was and compare the amount of traffic you would get from that or from the appeal decision, and not from a blank piece of paper. So I'm just saying that any reasons for refusal have to be predicated on a measurement of which is not starting from a blank sheet of paper. So, and I don't think that the objectors are starting from a blank sheet of paper situation. But that doesn't mean you can't, Councillor Perry, but it just means that you need to, take that on board in shaping any grounds. Now I move to Councillor Wilby, who I think has indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I talked quite out. I was quite against this at the last time this came towards the actual committee, and the applicant has actually answered a fair few of our questions, and actually gone back and actually changed the stuff that we've asked him to change from that meeting, and that rear window that we keep obsessing about is already a rear window that overlooks the neighbour's garden. So the neighbour is not losing privacy. In fact, the applicant is actually slightly improving that with the window on that floor, not on the one above, but on that floor. So I think on that status, that's a false narrative that we're going down. I'd also say that he's actually taken the wall out and he's put the hedge in, and he's actually made some changes that are actually for the benefit of what we've asked for. And I'd like to actually propose that we recommend this as per papers.
Yeah, I would might. Can we just clarify where this acoustic fence is going before because I think that was a legitimate question.
Yes, and that was actually asked. So, Chairman, I did ask at the last meeting as well.
Because if Mr. Bailey could come back on that, because I would like to nail that down before any motion for approval is even thought about. Mr. Timms, sorry. Mr. Timms, can you go back?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I was just going to share my screen because I appreciate it's still zoomed out, but hopefully it's helpful. Just bear with me. Yeah, so if you can see this, it's the sort of dotted line on the north side. Now, what the applicant's showing, because there may not be agreement with the neighbour to replace the current fence, which as I understand is potentially the neighbour's fence, they will set it inside if they have to. And
well, I think it's pretty likely, Mr. Timms, that they will have.
Yeah, well, I won't. Yeah, I think it possibly is, but they will set it inside. And if you can see this, and if you looked at the plans, the black dotted line is where the acoustic fence will go, and that's set inside the boundary. And as you can see here, it does not affect. You've got landscaping on the outside, so it doesn't affect the width of the access here. And it doesn't really interfere with the proposed native hedge here. So it's within the site and it doesn't obstruct the access.
Yeah, I think we've probably best assume that is where it is going to go. Right, thank you for the clarification. Sorry to interrupt you there, Councillor Wilby. Had you finished or did you have something else to say?
Well, I just also with the car movements, I went back and I checked what the previous business for me was, and it was a courier business, if I'm correct. Yeah. So the argument about the car movements doesn't actually hold about the increase. Yeah. In fact, probably if anything, there'd be a decrease in car movements. And on that ground, I don't think we've actually got a leg to stand on if we try to refuse on that. So as I said, I still stand by. I'd like to recommend it as on papers.
Thank you very much. And that's fine. I just needed to clarify that point. Is that seconded?
Yeah, I'll second that and reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, I think you indicated. Would you like to speak now? Councillor Powell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I wasn't around for the initial planning permission, so I'm probably looking at an application for 3 flats. The word over-intensification did come up, and that was obviously what kind of raised my eyebrows, and that's the reason why I suggested that I'd like to talk. But it's just a couple of other questions. The defensive one's been answered. Parking, could you just remind me? It's possibly in the report somewhere I've looked through, and I often miss things when I go through the reports, but how many parking spaces are there?
There's 10 parking spaces with 2 visitor parking spaces, which meets our adopted standards.
Right, because I was listening to the planning agent just now that said that it actually met the required standards for the local plan. I mean, why he mentioned that I don't know, but sometimes agents do. And I just wondered whether that was the requirement, even back to the local plan. Is that correct, Richard?
Yeah, as I said, yeah, it meets.
Yeah, that is correct, is it?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Fine. And light, there's 2 other things actually. There's light and air pollution was mentioned. Was a report done last time on light and air pollution as part of the information that the committee saw, or was that decided that it wasn't appropriate?
There's no need for a light pollution assessment for this type or scale of application, nor for an air quality assessment. It wouldn't reach the levels that you'd require that for.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing is DM1 keeps coming up time and time again. Could you, I mean, we've heard from the parish and the 2 ward members have both mentioned that this is against policy DM1. Could you actually just explain to me, sorry, I know you've probably gone all over this before, but the reason why you're suggesting that it does comply with DM1?
Yes, so DM1 is our policy that's relevant to residential amenity, basically. So yeah, what we've done, obviously, there's a consented scheme for 7, and as the chair said, we've got to bear that in mind and then look at the increase from the development. So in terms of the parking at the back under the approved scheme, there were 9 spaces at the back. We've now got 10 spaces. So although there's 3 more flats, there's still only 1 more space at the back. So 1 more sort of set of movements, if you like. We're also comparing it, as Councillor Wilby said, to the sort of fallback use of the offices. So with all that in mind, we don't consider the vehicle movements would result in a unacceptable impact in terms of noise and disturbance. And then the rest of amenity is obviously the privacy, overlooking, outlook and light, and we consider that that's okay. And I think, if I may, I think it is an important point. The existing building has a first floor window that exists, so that can occur, and that's exactly the same under the approved scheme. So really the difference here is a second floor window which will be half obscured, and it won't result in any more of an impact than the first floor to the immediate area at the back of the neighbour. But there are new windows on the annex to the rear, but again they are obscured at the level where there might be any overlooking. So they're the sort of two differences for overlooking. It'd be very difficult to defend that first floor window because it exists.
Well, okay. Thank you, Mr. James.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vizard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's only just one small point. It was just touched on. Eddie just touched on it. Is there any lighting being provided to the parking areas at the back so that there's parking of a night time? People have got visibility to get back to the properties, and it was only if there is lighting to be provided, rather than have lighting that's going to interfere with the neighbours, could it be addressed as low level lighting? That was all I wanted to say.
Yes, I'll take Councillor Brindle and then I'll ask for a response on that. She may have a question herself. Councillor Brindle?
Yes, I just would like perhaps if Mr. Timms could confirm to me that the height of the application is similar to that or the same as that to the left, that is the U's.
Thank you. There's two questions there, Mr. Timms, if you could respond to those. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take the lighting. I'll be honest, I'm not sure whether there is lighting proposed in that rear parking area. What we can do is secure that by condition, so we can see the details, and we can specify in that condition or by informative that we would wish to see low level bollard lighting.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Timms, that I would prefer to ensure there was a condition on that, because whilst I don't think personally there is a light pollution issue at the moment, if there's lighting to the car park, there is definitely a potential risk of it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd say we do a condition, but we can specify, as you've said, within that condition, so there's no wriggle room, if you like. Yeah, I think, and in terms of the question in terms of the height, yeah, it's what we would say is 2.5 stories, rooms in the roof, which is, I think there's a street scene plan, I haven't got it in front of me, which shows that the height fits in with the neighbouring property.
That is on page 37, if that's the one you're referring to, and it looks as if it's the same. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. You just made a brief indication there. Is that something you wish to speak to as you've reserved your right?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There was just 2 points I wanted to make, really. One is that the application as it is now does seem to be consistent with and compliant with our residential extensions SPD, which is a very good document. And I just, as I often do, I think that actually some of the policies within that SPD, if they were utilised more readily by officers, then we wouldn't have to defer things in committee sometimes. It would, that was a very rigorously document, a rigorously created document, which the inspector at the time commented on it being a very rounded and far-sighted document. So I just would commend that to officers. And on that point around any bollard lighting or low-level lighting, because it is to the rear and it's a car park basically next to a residential garden, if we are going to go down that route, I would suggest that it needs to be a condition, as you point out, Chair, to ensure that it is appropriate. And I suggest that motion sensor lighting is much better. I mean, what we are increasingly seeing is big halogen lights on the side of houses, which light up the entire street like a Christmas tree, and that will be very intrusive. So I think if we have a condition approach, it will be more belt and braces and ensuring that it does not impact the neighbour badly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We need to do that. Councillor Atkinson, I think you get the last word.
No, I think the Chair's very good review. Yes, I was going to suggest motion sensors as well. For the same reasons, Councillor Harwood, and also it's a crime prevention matter as well, because if a light suddenly comes on, neighbours are going to look out and see what's going on. So, yeah, just to say maybe that could be added into condition 10 of the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion proposed and seconded, which is as on the papers, but I would ask Councillor Wilby, and Councillor Harwood has already addressed that issue, whether he's happy to add a lighting condition.
More than happy, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, in that case, as no one else has indicated, I will move to a vote on the on the motion to approve. Mrs. Snook, if you could ask members to. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. It's going to be Mr. Fitzpatrick who's going to take the roll call.
Oh, Russell, sorry, I didn't see you on the call. Your icon was too small. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out the names. Councillor Atkinson.
4.
Councillor Brindle.
4.
Councillor English.
4.
Councillor Harwood.
4.
The commands.
4.
Councillor Munford.
4.
Councillor Parford-Reid. Sorry, not yet. Sorry, apologies. Councillor Perry.
Against.
Powell.
4.
No. Councillor Spooner.
4.
Councillor Vizard.
4.
Wilby.
4.
And Councillor Young.
Against.
Sorry. Can I ask the Democratic Services Officer for the score, please?
Thank you, Chairman. That's 10 in favour and 2 against.
Thank you very much. That application is therefore approved with the slight amended recommendation. We move on to the next application on the agenda, which is in a neighbouring parish, Oakhurst, Starbridge Lane, Marden, and I ask the officer to introduce the report.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, indeed we can.
Good. Okay, bear with me. Can we see that presentation?
We can, yes.
Okay. So, yes, so this site is Oakhurst, Starbridge Lane. It's for the change of use of land for the stationing of 18 holiday caravans with associated works, including laying of hardstanding and bin store. On the 5th of December 2019, members of the committee resolved to grant permission for this application, subject to appropriate conditions and informatives. At the time, members found the application to be acceptable in terms of its landscape impact, but this finding was based on advice that was subsequently found to be unlawful. In July this year, a High Court judgment found that it was an error of law for the committee to be advised that they could not require appropriate design details to be provided, and so could not exercise planning controls in relation to the design of the caravans. In light of this decision, members are now required to reconsider the application afresh, with the ability to control the design of the caravans in planning terms. The report now addresses the scale and design of the caravans, along with the previous reasons for deferral that were made back in May 2019, and all other relevant planning matters. For context, the site is in the countryside. The roadside western boundary is in flood zone 2, and the far eastern boundary is adjacent to ancient woodland here. To the north is the property Oakhurst, and to the south are other residential properties. So this is views of the site. This is the roadside boundary here, with Oakhurst in the distance. This is looking along the southern boundary, with the ancient woodland far in the background there. This is just a view of the site again. And this is taken from the access looking southwards along Starbridge Lane, and then looking north with the site boundary here and the well-established hedge. This photograph shows the access, and as you can see, it is set back from the highway. The red outline indicates the site area, and this is the proposed layout, which hasn't changed from previous considerations. As set out in the committee report to members on the 5th of December 19, the site area had been reduced from the original submission, and it was understood how many caravans there would be on the site, where they would be located, and what scale they would be. Members were also aware that the submitted visual impact assessment concluded that the proposal would have a minimal impact on the landscape from public vantage points. Subsequent to this, it is now known that the caravans will be clad in weatherboard with a timber stain, and that this detail can be secured by way of condition. Furthermore, the recommended landscaping condition will ensure the retention of existing trees and hedgerows, along with the planting of new trees and hedgerows. As set out in the committee report, this is an indicative layout of one of the caravans and what they could look like. Sorry, so back to the layout. So with these details secured, this must be considered alongside the previously proposed layout, the comprehensive landscaping scheme and the submitted visual impact assessment, which members previously found acceptable. When considering the previous reasoning and now taking into account the appearance of the caravans, it remains the view that the layout, scale and design of the proposal would not result in significant harm to the appearance of the landscape and the rural character of the countryside. Turning to other planning matters, it is important to stress that the High Court decision rejected the complaints in relation to the treatment of sustainability, the EIA screening opinion and the recommended holiday occupation condition. Furthermore, at the December 19 committee, members resolved to grant permission, considering there to be no grounds to object to it in terms of its location, residential amenity, highway safety, flood risk, biodiversity, foul and surface water disposal, ancient woodland impact and the viability of the business. This resolution to grant permission is still material, and there is considered to be no reasonable justification to divert from this view. The scene urgent update also confirms that KCC Flood and Water Management Team continue to raise no objection, and Condition 14 requests details of the method of foul sewage treatment prior to the occupation of any caravan on site. In terms of the recommendation, the conditions as previously imposed are still relevant, including the additions and changes as resolved by committee in December 19. As set out in the report, further conditions are also recommended to restrict touring caravans and motorhomes from using the site and to control the design and appearance of the caravans. The applicant has also voluntarily agreed to enter into a legal agreement that removes PD rights on the Blue Land. Whilst omitted from the report, it is also acknowledged that in July this year, full council resolved to adopt the Marden Neighbourhood Development Plan, and that it now forms part of the statutory development plan for Maidstone Borough. It is considered that the adoption of this document does not alter the recommendation presented. With everything considered, a recommendation of approval is therefore made on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Altieri. We have a number of submitted statements, and I commence with one from Mrs. Shave, who is an objector. Accepting that permitted development rights for up to 5 touring caravans presents the worst planning fallback from 18 permanent holiday homes is unjustified, because the traffic generation is 6 times to 8 times higher, probably far more on this single file unlit road with no footway, where holidaying children will be at severe risk. All members have seen on design is a CGI image and a stock mobile floor plan. It is incorrect to urge members to rely upon a condition, as high quality design is fundamental to be determined at the point where permission is granted. Court judged that design was key to acceptability of the proposed development in this location. Mr. Bembridge advises that this place is highly sensitive landscape, and the Maidstone Landscape Capacity Study only supports existing rural enterprises, which this is not, and that extensive, large-scale or intrusive development is inappropriate. and a report to members paints a different picture. This site is not well related to existing settlements, nor does it exploit any opportunities to make it more sustainable by improving the scope for access on foot, cycling or public transport, contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 84. The harm to living conditions of the applicant's dwelling, which is just 10 metres north of the site boundary, will be significant due to noise and disturbance, loss of privacy, odours and reduced outlook. Light pollution with loss of dark sky will also occur. Holiday makers in the countryside enjoy outdoor activities such as barbecues and music. The proposal will not result in a better place for the Oakhurst's hypothetical occupants to live, contrary to MPPF 124. There is nothing to advise members on this issue, despite policy DM1's amenity protection, mirrored by DM38 for holiday caravan sites. Ownership of the site can, of course, be severed from the house. The harm to amenities of the occupiers of the newly erected annex at Elmersey, just 10 metres from the site boundary and access point, have not been accurately assessed. The applicant's plans do not show its existence. Car headlights will shine directly into habitable rooms 10 metres away. Noise and disturbance, loss of privacy, odour and loss of dark skies arise here as well. This proposal will significantly harm the amenities of occupiers of homes either side of the application site, contrary to DM1, DM38 and MPPF paragraph 124. At the last meeting, these unacceptable impacts to nearby properties were not considered. The applicant has a 2018 prior approval for another dwelling adjacent, and Little Tilden Farm is within 200 metres. The advice at paragraph 616 is therefore incorrect. Approval will set a precedent, and the people waiting to submit similar applications if this is approved. There are no material considerations that justify permission in conflict with policies SP17, DM1, DM38, and the National Planning Policy Framework. Thank you very much, and that is from Mrs. Shea. We have then a statement from Councillor Mannington on behalf of Marden Parish Council. The Parish Council has already submitted its reasons in support of refusal of this application, and I repeat, it would mean the introduction of a vulnerable usage in flood zone 2. The proposal would result in the adverse impact on highway safety on a narrow country lane, would have an adverse visual impact on the countryside, and noise and light pollution resulting from the use would be detrimental to the residential amenity of the area. Despite conditions being attached, should the application receive approval, the Parish Council remains of the opinion that this proposal is inappropriate in this area of the countryside, and subsequent information submitted does not alleviate concerns about the commercial viability of the project. The Parish Council therefore continues to support refusal of the application. We should have a statement from the applicant. But that does not seem to have been printed.
Yes, Chair, there is one.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, do you have that? Because I do not seem to have it.
I think this is item 16. It's by Graham Simpkin, planning on behalf of the applicants.
Yes.
Chair, can I assist? Do you want me to read?
Sorry, I do have it now.
Okay.
Sorry, my apologies. I turned over 2 pages at once. Yes. We would like to express our view of the planning application. The application is a revised scheme that takes on board the decision of the High Court. It does not in any way. Sorry, there's only a sorry, you're going to have to do this, Russell. That isn't what I thought it was. My apologies. For some reason, Mr. Simpkins' report has not come through. Have you got it?
I believe so, Chair. Debbie, can I just confirm that this is the one which is item 16 in support of recommendation by Graham Simpkin Planning on behalf of the applicants?
Sorry, I'm just turning my microphone on. Hold on a second, please. It starts off speech for committee meeting, item 16 in support of recommendation by Graham Simpkin Planning on behalf of the applicants.
Yes, I have. For some reason, that has not come through.
Do you want me to read that, Chairman?
Please, would you do so?
Okay. If you bear with me, it's quite a long statement here.
Yes, thank you.
Members will be aware that the only ground that was successful in the neighbours' challenge to Maidstone's original decision was the lack of consideration of the design of the lodges. That has now been addressed through the submission of indicative plans of a typical lodge, which would involve weatherboarding with a wood-stained finish, in combination with suggested condition 3. What's been submitted is not a departure from the indicative details that were previously submitted, and it's therefore considered that such a design would ensure the development does not result in harm to the visual amenities of the area or the wider landscape. The officer's suggested condition that will secure the final details of design is entirely appropriate, as is hinted by the judge no less than 4 times in his judgment. The quashing order does allow members to revisit all other relevant aspects of the proposal, but to come to a different view would be unreasonable if those circumstances remained as they were. This includes whether any relevant development plan policies and other material considerations have changed. It is the applicant's view that there have been no changes in the relevant circumstances relating to the determination of the application, a view that is supported by officers as well as the most recent responses from the relevant technical consultees. It remains the case that not a single such consultee has objected to any aspect of this development. It is also relevant to note that the judge dismissed the neighbours' challenges against how Maidstone assessed the application in consideration of sustainability, the screening opinion, the holiday occupancy condition, traffic generation or permitted development rights as a fallback position, meaning all other aspects of the previous decision were assessed in a lawful manner. It is, however, noted that residents continue to object not just to the officer's recommendation, but to the findings of many of the technical experts, lobbying them in an attempt to change their minds, but without providing any expert technical evidence. It should be stressed that the officer is recommending conditions that will secure the submission and implementation of a detailed sustainable surface water drainage scheme for the site, something that doesn't benefit the site at the present time. The development therefore presents an opportunity to address any flow southwards. While circumstances have not changed to justify this, the applicants have also expressed a willingness to have permitted development rights withdrawn that would otherwise permit use of the east side of their wider site as a caravan and camping site. It was always their intention to not operate the two at the same time. However, a legal agreement withdrawing these rights will ensure that remains the case. Having demonstrated a willingness to cooperate with the wishes of officers and members all throughout the process, and having addressed all matters raised both during the initial determination and as a result of that decision being quashed, we maintain that the principle of this development is acceptable and that this is an entirely appropriate development in this location in accordance with your development plan. We therefore encourage members to accept the recommendation of your officers. And that's the end of the statement, Chairman.
Thank you. I do apologise for that. For some reason that just hasn't come through. The next speaker is Councillor David Burton, visiting member.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. The main issue I want to really focus your attention on this evening, I believe, is a new material consideration. Falling under DM1, we do need to highlight that since this application was last heard by yourselves, there is in fact a new property that has been constructed. Referred to by one of the previous speakers. I believe that
Sorry, we're losing your sound, David.
I can't hear Mr. Councillor Burton at all.
Not hearing at all.
I can hear you now, but I couldn't hear the last minute. Would you like to repeat it?
Okay, so what I was saying is that the matter I really want to draw to your attention under DM1 is the matter of the new property. I believe this is a new material consideration since you last considered the application. It's the construction of the property at Elmersey, and I did not hear any mention in the officer's report of the evaluation of the amenity impact on this property. I believe that as a minimum, you should ask for this to be deferred so that that can be considered if indeed you're not minded for refusal. But it's a material change to the circumstances from when you last heard the application or a different application. The other thing I would like to draw to your attention is this matter of design. And although we've got some reassurances in the report, I think I heard the officer this evening say, this is what it could look like. And if you are minded to approve, and I hope that you're not, then I would ask you to actually reserve that matter so that the detailed design of each unit is actually considered for what it will be, and that we don't rely upon what it could look like. Finally, members, I'd like to refer you to the opinion given by our environmental protection team. I know that you all take climate change very seriously, and although they said no objection, it was subject to conditions, and one of those that they put was that any dwelling with dedicated off-street parking should be provided with their own charging points for low-emission plug-in vehicles. And again, I hope that you're minded to refuse, but if you are minded differently, even via deferment, I would ask that you consider that condition. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Made a couple of interesting points there. Can I just clarify with the officers a couple of things? And with committee members, clearly members were minded to approve the, in fact, did approve the previous application without, when we thought we couldn't condition the design of issues. Obviously, design is effectively why we've got these issues back again. So it would seem reasonable to me to actually be looking at saying should and will rather than could in relation to design. And secondly, it seems to me that the only other new point that's been raised is precisely the issue that, other than the condition on electric charging points perhaps, is the point that Councillor Burton specifically raised, the impact of the new dwelling Elmersey. Can I ask for officers' views before we go any further on the significance of those 2 points and how we handle them?
Yeah, I can come back to that. The development Elmersey referred to is actually for an annex, ancillary accommodation for Elmersey. It is referred to in Appendix C. So that's the original committee report when we considered residential amenity. At the time, it was an extant permission, but even with that consideration, it was thought to not cause unacceptable harm. So for me, the issue has been considered. It is acknowledged that the building itself, like I said, is ancillary accommodation anyway, not a new dwelling, and it measures more than 15 metres away from the access to the site. So in these terms, I don't feel like it is a new material consideration.
No, I'm just saying that the important point I think you made there in planning law is that it was an extant consent, it just hadn't been built at the time. But because it's an extant consent, one should take that into account anyway.
And it was, yes. And in
so
terms
that's
of
the point, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of the design of the caravans, condition 3, the recommended condition 3, will ask for those details to be sought before any caravan is brought onto the site.
I think Councillor Burton's just asking for a greater degree of surety. And I'm not sure whether there's an appetite for it or not, but if we felt it was necessary to report that back to committee rather than leaving it as a delegated matter, how would you feel? because it is the issue that the decision turned on. Hello, Mrs. Oakley.
Sorry, I thought that was a question to members.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I would like an officer view on whether that was a reasonable thing to do, and a member view as well. Mr. Bailey, perhaps.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, the officer could answer. I would just, I mean, if members feel that that's an essential requirement, of course it's within their powers to do that. I would also just add in that potentially you could get 18 separate referrals coming back to you on the design of each unit. I do think the condition is very clear on the basis. It says that each caravan will be timber clad on condition 3 and dark stained, so it's not saying it's saying it must be. But it's up to the members. If they wish that to come forward, you could get 18 separate applications coming back to you for planning committee on each design as and when the caravans come forward. It's up to members.
Yeah, that had occurred to me, which is why I put it in quite such a sort of modest way. Anyway, there's a couple of people who have indicated. I think Councillor Wilby, is this on this application? I think, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman. Yeah, actually, David, Councillor Burton actually brought up a good point, which I already noted down. I'm not happy really making a decision on this either way with the lack of detail. That was the reason why it got brought back to us, was the lack of detail, and there still is lack of detail. And I'm not, I know there is a condition saying that the detail coming forward, but the judge specifically said about the planning committee not having the detail when we asked about the question. And I think we're going down that same route again. And I would propose we defer this and we actually have detailed design of what the caravans are going to look like.
I'm not unhappy with that, but if we're going to do that, do you want to include the point about electric charging points on the same deferral?
I was going to include the point about the electric charging points and a detailed, also I'd like to see a detailed planting plan as well.
Fine, no problem. Is that seconded?
Yes, Clive. I'll second it.
Councillor Powell, you were marginally first. Would you like to speak?
Yes, certainly. I'm pleased that Councillor Wilby actually brought that point forward. There's just a couple of other questions. I mean, can we just confirm as well how many weeks a year this site will actually be used for? And the reason why is because we had an application not too dissimilar at Cox Heath 3-4 years. I can't remember when it was. My memory's completely gone these days. Yeah, but yeah, 3 or 4 years ago for what was supposedly going to be a holiday campsite at the time, and it was quite a controversial meeting, of which I possibly spoke out of turn on the evening, probably not for the first time. Yeah, to suggest that what people would have the desires to take their holidays in Cox Heath, and that's not taking anything away from Cox Heath at all. It's just that I couldn't see 50 odd caravans at maximum occupancy throughout the year. But anyway, later on I was proven right. But my concern obviously with this site is that we've got to be very, very careful. Obviously it's not a member of the Caravan and Camping Club of Great Britain, and neither does it have to be with the current kind of law, but it's just some sort of protection for the environment more than anything, that it would be used for the summer months. But I'm seconding Councillor Wilby, and I totally agree with that lack of information, that we have to actually give this fair justice of a decision this evening.
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. I've wonderful. If we can concentrate on this particular point, Councillor Vizard, did you want to address deferral or non-deferral at this point? Otherwise, or anything you want to include in that?
Well, it was really only exactly what Paul had come back on was detail, and I'm actually looking at page 68, paragraph 15, when we're talking about.
I can't hear anything.
It's about the lighting, and that's got to be submitted before any caravans get there, and it's on for our approval. So obviously it's the light pollution thing comes into it again, Mr. Chairman. It's where I'm coming from.
Well, I think the condition would cover the lighting issue. I don't think we need to.
No.
necessarily ask for full details at this stage, and
I'll
unless
accept
there's
that.
something you think's been missed out. So I'll take Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Powell raised the point that I was going to address, which is these are supposed to be holiday caravans. So could we impose a condition saying that the site is closed for at least 1 month a year?
Generally speaking, that's not how the government planning inspectorate wants you to deal with that sort of thing these days.
Well, it may be the case, but that would ensure that it is only used for holiday use and not permanent occupation, wouldn't it?
Don't you believe it, mate? Mr. Bailey, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. By the way, that sighing is not me in the background. I'd just
Not me either.
I'd just like to add. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I can see where members sort of taking this. I would just like to sort of refer members to paragraph 510 of the report, where clearly the judge, when looking at this scheme, did say there'd been an error in law on the basis that we had advised members incorrectly that you could consider design, but the judge is also very clear on the basis, and the officers highlighted by her highlighting on paragraph 510, that as long as you considered that design detail and you impose conditions to that effect, you would have effectively considered design parameters. The applicant has said, well, they don't actually know what design's going there, because at least they give an example, at least 5 of those units are going to be sold to individuals, and I'm assuming what will happen is they'll get a brochure and they'll be able to pick a particular design, but the specification will be that it will be timber clad and dark stained. So I think if we're going down on the basis that the applicants clearly said they wish to deal with it in the manner that has been set out in the report, they've previously declined to provide the actual details for the very specific reasons that I've just mentioned. So if you do defer it and we've got to go back to it, I'm sure the applicant's going to say exactly the same thing as they dealt with when this application was being drafted for members tonight. And then we're in a position to bring it back to saying the applicant still wants it assessed on these details. So we could get into quite a difficult situation on that point, and members would have considered the design on the details they've got in front of them. So I just wanted to sort of make that point very clearly. The judge clearly made the distinction and the ability to control the design through the use of the conditions, which is highlighted in 510 of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
If they've got a template of designs, it must be possible for us to consider them. So, sorry, I'm not convinced this is irreconcilable. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to have a debate on the substance of the application if there is going to be potentially a deferral. So can I just? So I'm going to test the water and see if members want to defer it or not. Because I'm not going to discuss this twice and then have another full debate in the future. So anyone wish not to defer it? No one. In that case, then I'm going to put that to the vote unless anyone wants to add anything into a deferral. Because I think members do want to assess what at least rather more detail of the design than we've actually got. Plus the landscaping plan, plus the EV points. Can Mr. Fitzpatrick, a motion's been proposed and seconded. So can we just put that to the vote, please?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Atkinson.
For.
Councillor Brindle.
For.
Councillor English.
For.
Councillor Harwood.
He's had to go to a work thing.
Okay.
He's not here at the moment.
Sorry, I think Councillor Spoon, I think your mic is open.
That is Councillor Spooner, heavy breathing. Yes.
Could you your mic, please? Thank you. Councillor Kimmans.
For.
Councillor Munford.
4.
Councillor Perry.
4.
Councillor Powell.
4.
Councillor Spooner.
4.
Councillor Vizard.
4.
Councillor Wilby.
4.
And Councillor Young.
4.
And can I have the vote count, please, Mrs. Snook?
It's 11 in favour, Chairman. Thank you.
Right. Any against? No.
No.
And no abstentions. So that is passed. We now proceed to item 18, page 135, land rear of Reic, I think it's pronounced, house, Warm Lake Road, Sutton Valence. And have the officer to introduce the report, please.
Apologies, sorry. First time doing this. Right, let's try again. Sorry for the delay.
It's all right, don't worry.
Right, can we see that?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Right. So, yeah, this application relates to land rear of Reic House, Warm Lake Road. The proposal is an outline application for the erection of 3 detached dwellings, with matters of access and layout being sought at this stage. The site is a parcel of land located within the countryside. To the north, there is an approved residential scheme with access from Maystone Road. This is Warm Lake Industrial Estate here. To the east is Marwood House and their garden. To the south is Reic House, and to the west here is agricultural land. Warm Lake Road runs along here. Within the site, as you can see, there's not much to see, but this is the view of the western boundary here, and Reic House's garden boundary is here. This is the northern boundary, and this is where the access will go. And this is from within the site, looking back towards the eastern boundary with Marwood House's garden. This is the southern boundary and Reic House in the background. In between the 2 properties, there is an existing access, and that's just through this gap here. As can be seen on the site location plan, they have put in the development already approved to the north of the site. And this is now the proposed layout. In general terms, the proposed layout shows the continuation of the access road serving the development to the north, leading into the application site. There is to be no access from Warm Lake Road, and a condition has been recommended to safeguard this. To remind you, this is Warm Lake Road here, that's the existing access, and as you can see, the garden land continues round. The detached houses are located around the access road, with their gardens predominantly abutting the outer boundaries of the site, and indicatively, the submission shows the landscaping along the boundaries to be enhanced. There is significant planning history on the site, including an extant permission for 1 dwelling, and as accepted by a number of planning inspectors, the site is not considered to be unsustainable in terms of its location. As such, the principle for residential development on this site is considered to be acceptable. Turning to the matters for consideration, there is no highway safety objection raised to the proposed access. With regards to layout, it is important to note that an inspector concluded on an earlier scheme for 3 dwellings that there would be no harm to the character and appearance of the area. Whilst the layout now for consideration is different, it remains that backland development has been accepted, and the plots now shown remain of a similar size to those previously proposed. Furthermore, there is a clear relationship between this site and how the houses to the north are laid out. On this basis, it is considered that the application would not appear cramped or out of place with the pattern and grain of development in the area. When considering the planning history for the site, the main issue of concern relates to residential amenity. The 3 previous housing schemes have been refused because of their likely impact on the amenity of the occupants of Reic House and Marwood House. The objections have focused on general noise and disturbance from the use of the access in between these 2 properties. So this is set out in the report, but 3 previous schemes, all in some way using that access in between the 2 properties. Unlike these previous applications, the proposal now shows sole access from the housing development to the north. The layout has already been reconfigured so that the access road is noticeably shortened, and the access road and parking areas are now set away from the boundaries of Reic House and Marwood House, with gardens and buildings acting as suitable buffers. As such, it is considered that the vehicle movements associated with the new development would no longer have an unacceptable impact on the occupants of these houses. In other respects, the new dwellings would be more than 21 metres away from the rear elevations of Reic House and Marwood House. These neighbouring properties benefit from relatively large gardens, separating their houses from the proposal, and when safeguarding the amenity of neighbours, the reserved matters of scale, appearance and landscaping are still to be considered. Furthermore, the planning inspector made it clear under a previous scheme for 3 dwellings that such a proposal would not unacceptably harm the living conditions of surrounding occupiers in terms of outlook. As set out in the report, the application is considered to be acceptable in terms of all other material planning considerations, and it is recommended that the application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a number of statements submitted this evening in relation to this application. The first one is from Mr. Golding, an objector. With very little time to submit comments prior to the meeting on the 26th, and amid my concerns as to the recommendation, I trust the committee will consider the facts in its decision. Further to my submitted objection to the above, I would add the following for the attention of the committee. The proposal is contrary to policy DM1 of the Maidstone Local Plan and the aims of the National Planning Policy Framework. It will be a very cramped development, increasing the appearance of an urban site in a non-urban area at the edge of Warm Lake, next to open countryside. The plots are so close to each other that they will afford no privacy for the occupants and have no provision for visitor or delivery parking within the undersized turning area. Plot 3 will affect our privacy and amenity, overlooking close to our northern border, and be so close at the rear with its bedroom windows that will overlook our short rear amenity area. Subsequent noise and light generated by these units will totally change our way of life. They will also be privy to every time one of my family flushes the toilet, both up and down, which are facing the amenity area of plot 3. Much weight has been put by the applicant on the fact that these units conform to a current built form. These are unbuilt as yet, and so are not setting a precedent. In fact, item 2.6 of the supporting planning statement and included site plan shows this section of Warm Lake Road has a relaxed piecemeal layout with a defined building line and road frontage as shown on the map. Why is this not an important consideration when deciding to develop a backland site with no conformity to the existing built form? All that will be achieved by this and the other units will be a bunched up housing estate entered past an industrial business estate that I fear will be difficult to sell. In fact, I suspect the applicants realise this, as they are no longer willing to develop said site but have now decided to sell it as a development site. With the imminent sale of the original units, this puts a very large question mark on this application, and if granted, how long and what would happen in the future. It is difficult to understand what benefits the community now or in the future squeezing 3 houses onto a plot that already has permission for 1 house that would add to a relaxed piecemeal layout. We now face the destruction of a mature line of trees that have acted as a screen for the business estate, which we were of the understanding that these were to be a provision of planting to be retained for the increase from 5 to 6 units. I do hope that the committee has studied the objections and past reasons for rejection and will not be affected by the recommendation for approval. A lot of time and effort has gone into protecting this piece of land and the preservation of this semi-rural area. Please reject the application. We turn now to Councillor Poulter of Sutton Valence Parish Council. Dear members, this parcel of land has been the subject of planning permissions or attempts for them for several years. In January 2016, planning permission was granted under appeal for a detached single dwelling. The parish council wish to object to this development. We believe that it does not respond positively to the local character of the area, in particular with regard to scale, height and site coverage. The development plan leads to coalescence with the development of the Warm Lake Business Park, thus creating a suburban feel rather than retaining the semi-rural natural character of the area. The policy therefore contravenes to NBC Local Plan 2017 Policy DM1 and Policy SP17 Paragraph 7. Development in the countryside will retain the setting of and separation of individual settlements. This application does not respect the amenities of occupiers of neighbouring properties and will cause excessive general noise, overlooking, and there is an unacceptable loss of privacy and light enjoyed by the occupiers. The land at the rear of Reic House is situated at a higher level than the house, and the development would overlook the house and Merewood House to the extent that their privacy outside and inside their homes would be invaded. NBC Local Plan Policy DM1 Paragraphs 4 and the aims of the National Planning Policy Framework are therefore contravened. The Parish Council is concerned generally about the number of houses being built in the Warm Lake hamlet of the parish. There is limited safe pedestrian access to connect to the amenities of the rest of the parish. For the sake of the residents who will have to suffer excessive noise and the loss of privacy, please refuse this application. Councillor Poulter, Chairman Sutton Valence Parish Council. And finally, for the applicant, Miss Bedford. Good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant for this application. Local and national planning policies seek to make best use of land and to promote the development of underutilised land in meeting the demand for housing in appropriate locations. As detailed within the officer's report, there is an extant permission for one dwelling on the site, thus the principle of residential development has been accepted. In respect of the earlier planning applications on the site, no concerns were raised surrounding the principle of free houses in this location, with the planning inspector previously acknowledging that free dwellings at this site would not be out of character with or harmful to the appearance of the area. There were, however, concerns raised in respect of potential harm to the living conditions of adjacent properties and occupants through noise and disturbance. Our client has sought to address these concerns within this outline planning application through reconfiguring the layout of the site, providing greater separation from the proposed dwellings and the existing properties to the south, Reic and Merewood House, ensuring all properties are accessed from the north, reducing the internal access and hard standing areas and incorporating enhancements to the landscape buffer to the south. The planning officer, in considering these proposals, has acknowledged that the indicative layout would safeguard the amenities of the residents of Reic House and Merewood House through the proposed siting of the dwellings and parking area, resulting in a suitable buffer between the dwellings. It is also acknowledged that the proposed layout would safeguard the living conditions of future occupants of the proposed dwellings and the developments to the north. It is therefore recognised that the previous reason for refusal had been satisfied. In terms of biodiversity, an updated reptile survey was undertaken on the 30th of September 2020 and submitted to the council. The ecologist has confirmed that there's been little change on the site and the grassland which it consists of is species poor, heavily managed and kept short without a thatch layer, which is considered unsuitable for common reptile species. The planning officer has produced a robust report which thoroughly considers the proposals against all relevant policies. It concludes that there is no significant conflict with the development plan or national planning policy framework. There are no material planning considerations to justify the refusal of this application, and we hope the members are able to share the conclusion drawn by the planning department in recommending this application for approval, and that was from Vicky Bedford on behalf of Bloomfield's Planning Consultancy. So that brings us to any members wishing to speak on this application, and I think I've seen Councillor Young. Councillor Young.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I've got two real concerns about this application. The first is that the last application was again for three dwellings and it was turned down. It has got an extant application for one dwelling. I just cannot understand how you can possibly squeeze 3 houses of this size onto that plot. There's no provision for any visitors parking on it. If a large vehicle comes into that cul-de-sac, how do they turn round? There's no provision for waste bins to be accessible for the waste refuse vehicle. So I think the owners of these properties would actually have to take their bins right the way down to the end of the road in order for them to be emptied. I just cannot see how you can possibly squeeze these 3 properties onto that plot. So thank you. Those are my points that I'd like to raise.
Okay, we'll take a couple of extra speakers, then we'll see what we can do with those questions. Councillor Wilby.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the same as Councillor Young. I'm a bit. I do see this as overdevelopment for this site. I do think cramming 3 houses on there is too much. If you look at the layout of the existing estate, they are more generous in their layout and with their gardens. And another one of my concerns is that hedge that just gets completely ripped out for plot 2, I believe it is. That seems to vanish completely. Now that is a biodiversity loss, which I don't think is gained. There isn't a net gain anywhere back within this development. I agree with Councillor Young. This is overdevelopment for where this is. If this was maybe 2, I think they could get away with it, but I think 3 is just too much, and the loss of that hedge is too much as well.
Yeah, that is a pity, isn't it? Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can't really add much to what the previous 2 speakers have said. I mean, you know that I'm always concerned about access for emergency services vehicles and refuse disposal. So, you know, I really think we should decline this on the grounds that it is overdevelopment. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously we need to bulk that out a little bit, given Councillor Mumford.
Well, it's been said, I'd be happy looking at 2 homes with the retention of that hedge. I'm not happy at looking at 3 units in that cramped condition and the loss of a hedge.
Thank you. My only concern, if I can come back to officers, is can we clarify exactly what it was said in the appeal decision about what this site can and can't accommodate?
Yeah, it's set out in paragraph 7.07 of the committee report. For the previous application for 3 dwellings. I observed during my visit to the area instances of other backland development. It said it wasn't uncommon in the surrounding area, and given the indicative layout shown, the plot sizes would be similar to those under construction to the adjacent site. There is nothing to suggest that such development would be out of character with what has gone before. I would therefore conclude proposal would not harm the character and appearance of the area and would not therefore conflict with local plan policies.
Yeah, it's quite a problem. Did Mr. Bailey want to add anything at this point?
No, I think it's been clearly set out, Chairman, and this scheme considers the access and the layout of this particular scheme, and I think the case officer has alluded to the inspector already considered 3 units in this backland site to generally be acceptable and not cause harm.
So in other words, we could not say simply that 3 units were unacceptable in and of themselves. We would have to give very clear reasons why these particular 3 units were unacceptable.
You would do, and you'd have to, I mean, obviously we're pointing the attention to the material consideration of the inspector's decision, so you'd have to say why this particular scheme is different to the one the inspector considered under the 17/503/541, because it used the same policies as you would currently be assessing now. The only difference between the two, correct me, Ms. Altieri, if I'm wrong on this, the only difference between that one is that was an illustrative detail on those plans in front of you. What you're now considering now is a layout as being part of this outline application.
But what the inspector considered was in no way significantly different than this application.
Apart from it, he was considering an illustrative detail, but clearly the inspector took the view that those 3 units could be accommodated and they didn't cause harm to the character and appearance if that scheme came forward like that. Otherwise the inspector would have had to draw very clear attention to the fact that I think you can get 3 units, but the layout that you've submitted illustratively is not acceptable, and that would be good practice to do that. So in effect, I think, yes, you are saying that 3 units on the site has been considered already acceptable by an inspector. Members would have to give that weight. It's up for the decision maker to determine how much weight they do that, but it is certainly material. And as officers, we'd be saying to members, you'd need to clearly set out what the difference between the two is. I.e. that's the scheme considered by the inspectorate and the current scheme.
Yeah, so I think the issues that members were referring to specifically was the lack of loss of the hedge and no biodiversity loss rather than a gain, and the parking issues, not having any visitor parking at all.
Sorry, Chair, I think the scheme for the 17503541 is on page 137.
Yeah.
That can just be confirmed by Kate.
I don't have the agenda. Is it paragraphs 202 to 204?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 204
yeah.
is 17503541.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. While we're thinking about that, Councillor Spooner, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I had to put 3 telephones in the instant messaging. Right. My instant messaging doesn't seem to be working very well. Sometimes
when you get that message, it hasn't gone. Usually, it actually has gone. So
that's it. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So I just kept on pressing the button.
Yeah.
Okay. I think in an ideal world, I fully understand how the residents of Reic House and Merewood House are feeling about all of this. And in an ideal world, it would be nice to have sort of gradation of density between the new development to the north and what is existing along Warm Lake Road to the south. In an ideal world, I think that this application site should take just 2 dwellings, but we are heavily committed by what the inspector said in his decision. And unless we can come up with some really strong reasons for rejecting this and saying we're only prepared to accept 2, I think we are stuck with this scheme, to be quite honest. And I'm struggling to find any reasons for refusal. I just don't think what's come out so far about the lack of biodiversity is going to be sufficient to justify a refusal. But that is just my thoughts. I'm sure other councillors might have other ideas. Thank you.
Well, to be honest, Councillor Spooner, it was very much the reason I was asking the questions I was, because I can't see a ground of refusal. I just can't see one, unfortunately. So, Councillor Atkinson, as you haven't spoken yet, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at page 138, 2.05, referring to that application from 2017, it says the planning inspector concluded, blah, 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 it would harm the living conditions of surrounding occupiers through the effects of noise and disturbance.
That's right.
Contrary to local plan policy DM1. Sure, that's a good reason for refusing this application.
Well, if we take the view that's still the case,
But it's still 3 dwellings, isn't it?
Well, yes.
So it must be still the case.
Can we return to the case? This is a relevant point you raised, though, Councillor. Officers have assessed the application as having overcome the grounds of refusal originally, and have set out in the report why. Do members agree with that? Because if they don't you know, and if they don't, why not? Does anyone want to come back on that?
May I speak, please, Councillor?
Yes, I only took Keith because he hadn't spoken already. Councillor Young.
Yes. Is policy DM23 relevant?
Might be, but
you know, a mix of dwellings and the need for visitor parking.
Yeah, parking is an interesting one. We'll park that point for a moment and see if anyone else has any points they want to raise. Sorry, bad pun. Councillor Mumford.
It's. I don't think we can challenge the 3, but I think we could actually insist on the retention of that hedge, because this is indicative, and we ask for the retention of that hedge. That goes some way to satisfying me.
Yeah. What would be the effect of that on their proposal, Mr. Bailey?
If I could ask the case officer, because we are considering layout on this proposal.
Because I think that was a major problem for members losing that hedge, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like to be a principal issue, but I'll ask the case officer to respond on that point.
Sorry, Miss Altieri, I should have asked you first.
That's fine. Yeah, layout is for consideration. So the plot to the northern boundary probably would see the loss of that hedge. The hedge is thought to be of little amenity value, and through the reserve matter of landscaping, the site will benefit from enhanced and new native hedgerow planting along the other boundaries, which I think is important to note. So in terms of the layout, I'm not sure if maybe further sections of that, maybe all the hedge might not have to be removed, but certainly for the access and the property, it looks like it would have to.
Okay. Councillor Wilby, you were concerned about that issue. Did you want to say anything more on it?
Yeah, I've just had a quick look at Google Maps. I was obviously unable to get to this site. You know, I wouldn't deem it as a low value hedge. Bats use hedges as highways, for example. So I'm sure if Tony was here, he'd take us through down a nice little story about it. But I would ask that if that hedge does need to come out, that it gets replaced with a native hedge then of similar sorts. That can be done. The improvements around the boundaries that you're talking about, and sorry to the case officer, I don't think there's already a hedge around this whole site, so I don't think there's actually a improvement on the biodiversity front. So I think that a hedge would need to be replanted, or as much of that hedge would need to be retained as possible. Yes, I see the size of that hedge may be an issue, so maybe it could be coppiced first of all, to actually bring it back down to size, and let the hedge actually regrow. But I would ask the officer to at least try to keep that hedge as part of the actual landscaping and the detailed layout coming forward.
Yeah, okay. I think that's fairly clear.
Could I suggest, Chairman, that on that point, that if members were minded to approve the application, you give delegated authority to the head of planning, and it may well be that on that point, that part and parcel of that application could be a slight movement of that plot to the offending plot to the south, and you know, those are conversations that the officers can have with the applicants in order to try to seek the retention of that hedge, or if that's not possible, then obviously we would impose conditions on a suitable native replacement.
I think that's appropriate. Thank you. That's very helpful. Is there anyone I've missed who wants to come back in? Eddie, Councillor Powell, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm just following on from Councillor Atkinson's point. I don't think we've really addressed that point.
It is rather key, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Planning application 17503541. Well, when I'd look at the relevant planning history, which is all over the place, I would imagine that there was more than one inspector involved with all of those different areas, and as we all know, that two different inspectors could give you two completely different kind of points of view. But the only one that we can rely upon is what was actually kind of referred to before. And I'll just bring you back to Councillor Atkinson's comment earlier on, where it states that in 205 on page 138 that it where it starts off positive, would not harm the character and appearance of the area, but it would harm the living conditions of surrounding occupiers through the effects of noise and disturbance. I don't think we can just sort of dismiss that out of hand, Mr. Chairman, without perhaps some clarification or even other viewpoints from members.
Well, the point is that was the reason for the refusal before, which the applicant says and the officer's report says has been overcome. Now, members are free to ask questions as to whether, or even to say that they don't think it's been overcome, but you do need to actually say why you don't think it's been overcome. Because obviously, if it hasn't, the original appeal decision should be the decision here. So if you could possibly, for the help of members who are maybe a little uncertain, Miss Altieri, outline very succinctly why officers think that previous refusal has been overcome.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify some points before that, the 17 application is the only one that's actually been to appeal.
Yes.
The two applications, the 19 and the 20, were refused under delegated powers. So going back to the 17 application that was dismissed by the inspector, the objection focused around the access and the use of that access in between Reic House and Marwood House. And the movements involved with that. The recent refusal prior to this application again showed parking areas, turning and vehicle access right up to the boundary of Reic House, and it was still felt this wasn't acceptable. This application has now basically put the gardens to gardens as a buffer with what is a very short access road with the parking as far away to the north as possible. So for me, the inspector, that's the issue he had, and that's why I feel this application's overcome that.
Thank you, that's very clear. So members would have to, if they took a different view, say why, in their view, the application has not overcome it. Right, I'm going to try and wind this up in a minute. But first of all, Mr. Fitzpatrick, we always like to hear from you.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I think my first point was just going to say, I think that the issue with regards to noise and disturbance, which Kate has just confirmed, was in relation to the access on the 17 application. Now that access has been removed and access is coming through the other end. If I'm not mistaken, I think that also goes past some form of an industrial park. The second point is that with regards to the decision of the inspector, well, there obviously has to be consistency in decision making, and the inspector's decision is a material consideration, for which I would suggest that quite substantial weight would need to be given to.
Yes, as I think I was saying earlier, right, I'm going to take the two people who've indicated, and that's unless there's something substantially new. Councillor Wilby.
Well, after hearing the response from the officers and obviously that detail about the appeal and the reasons that it wasn't put back was the access, regrettably, I'm actually going to put forward the motion to actually recommend what's on the papers with the delegated powers to the officers to try and retain the hedge.
Yeah, I will second that because I don't think we got much option with the appeal decision, but I will take Councillor Brindle to have the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On other applications I've viewed over the years, we have had a vehicle sweep pattern, and I'm still a bit concerned about the turning arrangements when it gets down to when a refuse collection will get down to the bottom three that are the subject of this this planning application. I'm not certain that there's enough room down there for a vehicle to turn effectively. But then if you go back to the original, the houses that are there, I'm not certain how it's going to turn around when it gets there either. So I just have a bit of a major concern about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, quite often this does happen with developments, new and old. But sadly, I don't think that's going to be quite enough to change the situation. Unless anyone has anything further to add, I'm going to put
Chairman, can I just come in briefly? I do think that having read what the planning inspector said, that did refer to the previous one where the access was from the south, so it would make quite a big difference as the access is no longer applying. So I think maybe we'd be hard pressed to actually refuse this, but I think the committee is minded to actually give permission. So in that case, I'd like to say that condition 4, we should exclude sycamores and non-plastic guards for trees and hedgerows. And condition 6, it says such methods as Swift bricks, Baptist bricks, and or B bricks. I think the word or should be removed, because I think nowadays all new developments should have all of those things built in. So I think the word all should be deleted. But now I've reread the report and listened to what the officer said, I think we have no alternative but to keep this out.
I have no objections to your proposed changes to the conditions. Does Councillor Wilby?
None at all.
Thank you. In that case, I shall put that motion to the vote then. Mr. Fitzpatrick, please, if you could call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Atkinson?
4.
Councillor Brindle?
Reluctantly 4.
Councillor English?
4, with no great enthusiasm.
Councillor Howard?
He's not here at the moment.
Apologies. Councillor Kimmins?
4.
Councillor Munford?
4.
Councillor Perry?
4.
Councillor Powell?
Against.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor Spooner, yes.
4. Sorry, I suddenly lost all sound again, sorry.
Councillor Vizard? Councillor Vizard? Okay, we'll come back at the end.
Sorry, that was mouse chasing. It went to sleep. I'm against.
Against. So, sorry, I just confirmed Councillor Vizard's against, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wilby?
4.
And Councillor Young?
Against.
I can have the outcome, please, Mrs. Sneak.
No, Chairman, just counting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 8 in favour and 3 against.
Thank you very much indeed. An amended recommendation is carried, and it is now 2 minutes past 8. So if you could come back at 20 past for the second half of this exciting, well, may not be the second half, but the second part of this exciting meeting. 20 past. Meeting adjourned. So up the lights, cameras and action again. Are you ready, Mo? Thank you very much. Can I ask Mrs. Snook to take the roll call again, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Atkinson.
Present.
Oh, sorry, I started doing a voting sheet then. Sorry. Councillor Brindle. Councillor Brindle.
Present.
Councillor English.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Present.
Sorry. Councillor Eves, we have apologies.
Yes.
Councillor
Apologies,
Harwood's not back, is he?
No.
Councillor Commands.
Present.
Councillor Mumford.
Present.
Councillor Perry.
Present.
Councillor Powell.
Present.
Councillor Spooner.
Present.
Councillor Vizard.
Present.
Councillor Wilby.
Present.
And Councillor Young.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Snook. Now we proceed to the urban air part of Maidstone, land rear of 335 Queen's Road, Maidstone, Kent, and ask the officer to introduce the report.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you. Let me present my desktop.
Ah, there we go.
Yep. All right. So this site is outlined in red, which is the rear of 335 Queen's Road, with the east side of the boundary facing Queen's Avenue. And this proposal is a part retrospective application for the erection of a two-story detached dwelling, including creation of new access onto Queen's Avenue. The site has been granted permission for a similar proposal in 2018, and the site in its original state is slightly sloped, rising from Queen's Avenue by approximately 1.45 meters. And this is the view of the new vehicle access on Queen's Avenue looking into the site. And construction has commenced for the 18 permission. And during the course of the construction, excavation works have been carried out to level the sites due to the difference in topography. And this excavation works, which forms the key elements of these applications, includes the erection of 1.5 meter tall retaining wall surrounding 3 sides of the site, lowering of land level by some 70 centimeters, providing a level ground for the rear garden, and provision of patio area, and also a slight change to its site boundary at the garden area. This is the proposed site plan on the left, and the approved site plan for the 2018 permission on the right. The setting, position, and design of the building and the access remain the same from the previous permission. The main consideration of this application is to assess whether the impact of this proposed excavation works would have on the neighboring Wellingtonia tree with tree preservation order, which is located some 7.5 meters away from the site boundary, and part of the development falls within the root protection area of this tree. This photo shows the extent of the excavation work in relation to the neighboring tree and the nearest property, tall trees. And this proposed engineering plan shows the extent of the retaining wall, highlighted in black, surrounding the site, and the leveling of land at the rear garden in this part of the area. And you can also see from this tree protection plan which part of the building, a small corner of the building and part of the retaining wall and garden falls within the root protection area of the tree in this circle. A tree survey and agricultural report has been submitted in support of this application, and the tree officer has visited the site and is satisfied with this assessment and concludes the health of this Wellingtonia is unlikely to be affected and does not consider it would be grounds for refusal of this application. And given the site has this fallback permission for the same proposed dwelling and access, and the tree officer finds the assessment acceptable and concludes that the TPO protected Wellingtonia is unlikely to be affected by the proposal, there are no justifiable material planning reasons to refuse permission, and therefore I am recommending approval for this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. We have a number of people wishing to speak on this application, and the first one is Mr. Mitchell, an objector, and that objection will be read by Councillor Pearl, who's ward member. Over to you, Councillor.
Good evening. The council should not have validated this application and likewise previous applications for this site, as the Wellingtonia with TPO in my garden with a substantial section of root protection area in the development site was not part of the application documentation or plans as is required. Additionally, the council have not received and most alarmingly have not requested an application for tree works to trees subject to a tree preservation order as required under the Town and Country Planning Act. This has been the situation since the original application was being considered and subsequently approved, resulting in the council not placing any requirement on the developer to take account of and provide protective measures for the Wellingtonia. The council have accepted a number of subsequent applications for this site without the Wellingtonia details, including this current one, and have still not received or requested an application for tree works to trees subject to a TPO. This inaction by the council is in spite of them being reminded about the Wellingtonia on each occasion, reminders that should not have been necessary with the council being the keepers of TPO records. This gives the impression that the council planning officers did not want the Wellingtonia details to be included in any application. The application is seeking approval for a large section of the dwelling, a large area of patio plus extensive retaining walls to be constructed within the construction exclusion zone. Additionally, the application is also seeking approval for removal of 700 millimetres depth of soil from approximately 12% of the root protection area of the Wellingtonia. None of this is acceptable and should be rejected. There is recent correspondence between the case officer and the landscape officer in which the Wellingtonia is discussed. Similar correspondence took place when the previously approved application was being considered. The landscape officer has now advised the case officer that had he known the true extent of the encroachment into the construction exclusion zone and RPA, originally, quote, he would have objected as it could not be justified, unquote. It is clear, therefore, that had the council obtained correct documentation and plans for the original application, these would have identified the Wellingtonia and the true extent of the encroachment within the RPA and CEZ of the tree. The landscape officer would then have objected to it, as he now states. Consequently, as the true extent of the encroachment is now apparent, I would expect the landscape officer to object to the current application. The situation is the same and it still cannot be justified for all the same reasons. This application should therefore be rejected.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. We have a short statement submitted by Mr. Burr for the applicant. The current application is a revised scheme of the previously approved application. The house has not changed from that which was approved and is currently under construction. This application seeks to gain retrospective approval for changes to the landscaping along with alterations to the dividing site boundary to number 335 Queen's Road. It was this amendment that required this revised application to regularise the alteration. A similar landscaping scheme to that submitted was approved under the previous application, albeit the rear retaining wall did not extend to the boundary as it does in this current application. The main concern that has been raised relate to the Wellingtonia tree located in the adjacent plot at Tall Trees and the height of the proposed fencing that bounded 333 Queen's Road. The fencing was amended at the request of the resident of that property to ensure their privacy was maintained. The proposals now provide additional privacy to the neighbouring properties due to the revised fence heights and lower ground levels. Matters relating to the Wellingtonia tree have been addressed by the Council's Landscape Officer in the email of the 6th of November 2020. A change in site boundary arose as a request from the owners of number 335 Queen's Road to retain certain elements of their new rear garden, which have been reflected in the current application. We would like members to take the above into consideration when determining this application. We now return to Councillor Pearl for any comments he would like to make as the visiting member on his own behalf. Councillor Pearl.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, the committee report summarises my objections at, I think, paragraph 501 to the original application, and they kind of relate to this one as well, I suggest. I've been unhappy at how these applications have been handled, and do just want to reinforce some of the points made by Mr. Mitchell. It cannot be acceptable for us to agree to permit excessive trespass into the route protection area and construction within the construction exclusion zone of his Wellingtonia, knowing this to be in contravention of the requirements of British Standard 5837. It also cannot be acceptable for us to be prepared to do this without adhering to the requisite statutory processes. We seem to have repeatedly chosen to ignore the Wellingtonia. We've continually downplayed the effect of that this development will have on the tree. We seem sort of almost irresponsible for doing so without any regard for the potentially serious consequences of this, on the tree, on Mr. Mitchell, or on his neighbours. We have a responsibility, I think, to ensure that TPO measures are adhered to and trees are protected. And the committee must now take decisions, however difficult or inconvenient, to rectify previous mistakes and to make sure that this application is dealt with as legislation did and still does require. And on that basis, the application should really be rejected.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Before we go any further, would the officers like to clarify the procedural points relating to how a TPO application, which obviously was not sought, relates to a planning application procedure, and whether or not any regulations have been incorrectly addressed?
I can respond on this one if you like, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell and Councillor Pearl are correct in that normally severing routes to a protected tree does require the consent of the local planning authority. Mm-hmm. Usually this takes a form of somebody making an application under the tree preservation order, but where the council has granted planning consent, that overrides the need to submit a TPO application, so you don't need both. You only need one or the other. In this case, clearly some routes were severed as a result of the excavations that have already happened. They didn't have the benefit of planning consent or tree preservation order consent. So we did consider that in the first instance an enforcement and investigation and a potential breach of the TPO regulations. We didn't consider it expedient to pursue enforcement action because the extent of route severance that had actually taken place was very minor. So it wasn't considered expedient to pursue prosecution. So now we're looking at whether or not we now retrospectively grant planning consent, which will effectively regularise the lack of TPO consent in doing so. Does that fully answer the question?
Yes, I think it's important that members do understand the relationship between a TPO and a planning application. But the second point is I think members will want to be sure that if we grant consent, that we are not going to put the tree even at minimal risk.
Well, no, not not beyond the situation that already exists, because this is effectively retrospective.
Clearly, we can't reverse the past.
No,
obviously.
the damage that potentially would have been indicated by the plotting of the route protection area coming into the site as it does, that damage has already taken place, and I've been to site and assessed it, and it was actually surprisingly little route present. I counted about 4 or 5 routes over 50 millimeters diameter and none greater than 75 millimeters diameter that were actually present on that boundary where the excavations happened, and virtually nil fibrous route. So we're talking about the severance of about 4 routes that has already taken place and obviously can't be put back.
No, I think the concern is whether any further damage would result from further works.
No, it cannot, because there's no additional excavation proposed. It's already all taken place.
Yes, of course, there was none proposed when the damage happened in the first place, of course.
That's correct.
Councillor Wilby, I think you've indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Pearl. It's frustrating, shall we say, that we seem to get these quite a lot from the enforcement side of it. That the recommendation is to put a plan application in to rectify the mistakes you've already made, and the damage has already been done. And I agree with Councillor Pearl. I wish sometimes we would go down the prosecution route more, and that would actually probably put the wind at people a bit more not to do this, shall we say. However, the damage has been done, and I'm concerned about the extent of the new patio to go over the back of where the routes could potentially at lower level find their way back through, and actually what impact the patio would have on going across the actual route area that they're now proposing. I also have concerns about the fact that it looks like from the original application that what was a carport or a separate garage now has a door coming through into that garage, which has been skipped over as such, and the increase in the hard standing of the land at the front as well. So these are all things that do have an impact on the actual area and the drainage to go with it. That is a very large patio at the rear of that house. Which will have extreme runoff that goes over that route area, even though the routes have been cut back. And I think we should actually be mindful to actually at least bring that patio back at least halfway down outside of the route area for any potential. Because on my own place where I live, I know how much putting extra earth building on top of root areas can actually affect the tree. Won't affect it in the first year, won't affect it in the second, but 3, 4, 5 years down the line, it will have an impact. And that's when we'll see the impact on this tree in 4 or 5 years' time, unfortunately. There is very little we can do, but I would like those questions answered by the tree officer, if he could, about the patio and about whether it is within our powers to actually say that they can't, that patio does need to be drawn back as such, and the hard standing at the front needs to be implemented as the original plan.
Yes, thank you. I'll come back to that in a minute, but Mr. Bailey has wanted to raise a procedural issue before we go any further.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Depending what members do on the vote, if I could just seek delegated authority, because obviously the presentations revealed the fact that this is a part retrospective and the application is described as an erection of a 2-storey, and hence the conditions are granted on an implementation of 3 years. If members were minded to approve that, if I could have delegated authority to the head of planning and development to seek minor amends to the conditions to reflect that it's a retrospective application and the conditions need to reflect that accordingly. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I ask, question has been raised about this patio, and to be honest, I don't really like the sheer extent of hard standing. We try and avoid that in this day and age. Surely there's a better material that can be used if they have to have a standing. Mr. Caravan, what do you think about the patio and its potential impact?
It's always difficult to say because you can't see what's below the ground, but from what I've seen of the excavations, the routing that is present is at a level that's in the upper half of the bit that's already been excavated. Very little evidence of routing below that, so I think it's very unlikely that there is going to be any routing or any significant routing at the below patio level. So it's my view that it's unlikely to be harmful.
Thank you. Right, I'll come back to a couple of points later, but first of all, Councillor Powell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Powell, Councillor Powell has brought something quite valid to planning tonight, and I know where this application is going. But I think as far as this committee is concerned, the sheer fact that a misdemeanor, if you like, has been which has been done by a developer or somebody in order to enhance a planning application. Now, we will never know exactly how much of the route was actually taken away, but I would say Detective Inspector Councillor Powell would say that it would have been enough to fulfil his kind of wishes. But we are also seeing this quite a bit across the borough, where bits of hedges have been removed for planning applications. And I really would like us to make I couldn't say make an example, but for this committee to propose that tougher action is taken on developers to ensure that this type of thing doesn't happen again. We shouldn't really be put in a position at this particular stage. We should just be looking at the pure planning application and the merits of it, rather than having to look at an enforcement issue. But that's just my thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
I don't disagree with you in principle. Can I ask the planning officers about this hard standing? There's a lot of hard standing, and it will cause a lot of water collection if that's an impermeable material. Do we have to have all that degree of impermeable, probably, material sitting around there?
I would suggest that we could negotiate with the applicant to use maybe a more permeable hard standing.
It would be helpful, I think.
Yes, that I think that could be negotiable.
Yeah, okay, I would like to try
that for the amenity area, but not the actual hard standing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would help, I think. Right, anyone else wish to speak? Keith, I see Councillor Atkinson, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Clive, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the applicant was actually thinking that he was going ahead with the application which was approved in 2018, in which case he's already got permission to do the work he's done. So maybe he's got permission, so there's nothing we can do about it. We can enforce anything anyway. But if we're minded to give permission, which I suspect we will, condition 15, I'd like to see B bricks added in, obviously. And also condition 3, it says 1 electric vehicle charging point per dwelling. Well, hopefully there's only one dwelling on this site, so do we need the phrase per dwelling included in that? Thank you.
Well, unless we're building a using in this context, I think that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. Very reluctantly, with the two amendments to conditions that have been just suggested, I'm going to have to propose the recommendation on the papers, because unfortunately I can't see, given what the officers have said, any way of pursuing a refusal. I can't say I'm exactly delighted about it, but I will move the recommendation as amended. Councillor Perry.
Just add another comment. It's nothing to do with the recommendation, but on page 150 it says that that previous application wasn't available on the planning portal. I wonder if in future, when an application is withdrawn, we should put a note to the effect that it has been withdrawn, and if it's been replaced, refer to the replacement. If not, well, either way, delete any details of the application. It would be helpful to the public, perhaps, if we did that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Councillor. If you could make a note of that and send it to me in the next few days, because I will probably not remember it. Councillor Perry.
I'll be very quick. Like you, I'm very reluctant about this. I don't like what's taken place, and I think, as Councillor Powell said, it's been a kind of misdemeanour in the process, and clearly looking to the future, given the lack of resources in our enforcement area, I'm just wondering how any conditions we put forward to protect this tree and everything else will actually be enforced, because at the moment I find this whole application I'm really unhappy about. I don't like what's gone on in the past. I'm not sure what's going to go on in the future. Thank you.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Councillor. We need to look at these things when we make budgets, don't we? Councillor Wilby, you seconded that. Did you want to speak?
Just that we had the condition that the patio to the rear be of permeable materials.
Yes, I was incorporating that, but just to be absolutely certain, yes, for the record, we are including that. Yeah. And Councillor Atkinson's comment about the usual ecological points, Mr. Bailey.
Could I?
And of course, your point about making accommodating the application for the retrospective nature of the application.
I was just going to go through that just to sort of list what I've got as the amends. It's to reflect the description changes, part retrospective, the conditions to make sure that they asked to add condition 10. I've noticed there's not a not in there, so I've asked to add a not in condition 10. At the bottom part it says hard standing shall be carried out. It shall not be carried out. Negotiate with the applicant a more permanent permeable hard standing for the patio to the rear. Condition 15 add B bricks, and condition 3 amend to just.
We lost you there, Mr. Bailey.
Relate to the dwelling. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, I lost a sentence there. Would you repeat it? I'm sorry. You went off air.
Sorry, the last two. So yeah, my network's showing low coverage. Condition 15 add B bricks, and condition 3 to amend to just relate to the dwelling, not to as it says out in the current condition.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, if Mr. Fitzpatrick, if you would take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Atkinson.
For.
Councillor Brindle.
Reluctantly for.
Councillor English.
Ditto.
Councillor Harwood. Sorry. Councillor Kimmans.
For.
Councillor Munford.
For.
Councillor Perry.
Against.
Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Spooner. Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor Vizard.
Again, very reluctantly for.
Councillor Wilby.
Same as for.
Councillor Young.
For. Sorry, Chairman, it's Debbie. Could we just go back, because I keep losing some connectivity and I'm not hearing very well?
Who do we need to go back for?
I'm okay up until Councillor Mumford.
Debbie, I have noted it, but I'm happy to go through it again. Shall we take from the top, if you don't mind? Councillor Atkinson.
Well, this time I'm going to add in the word reluctantly as well.
I take that as a 4, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Brindle.
And reluctantly, I still am for.
English.
And again, yes.
Yeah, 4. Councillor Kimmans.
For.
Councillor Munford.
For.
Councillor Perry.
Against.
Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Spooner.
For and reluctantly.
Councillor Vizard.
Yes, for.
Wilby.
For.
Councillor Young.
For.
Thank you.
And the reluctants have it. I'm sorry.
That's brilliant.
Sometimes you have to weep. We move on with bated breath and excitement to Marden again. Sheephurst Lane, Marden.
Sorry, Chairman, that was 9 in favour.
Oh, sorry.
2 against. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I was getting carried away with excitement. As I was saying, thank you, Mrs. Snook. Apologies. Move on to the next application, land south of Sheephurst Lane, Marden. Sadly, not in Tunbridge, except postally, but there you go. Right, and a call on the officer to introduce the report. Item 17, page 109.
Can you hear me okay?
Indeed so, yes, thank you.
I take it you can see my screen.
Yes, we can, William.
Yep.
Okay, before I begin, I would like to request delegated authority, should members be inclined to permit the development, to impose additional highways conditions at the request of highways consultees to ensure that the development can be implemented safely. Additionally, the officer report notes that pylons would be removed. It should perhaps be noted that these would be replaced, but these works can be carried out under permitted development, and this is outside the scope of this planning application. So, beginning, the application seeks permission to site a switching station with the associated apparatus and landscaping, including a 2.4 metre high boundary fence and an access road on land south of Sheephurst Lane. The application also affects public right-of-way, KM 254, which runs across from here and up. As is detailed by the applicant, the existing infrastructure in the area is particularly vulnerable to lightning strikes, which requires a manual reset. This is a very dangerous situation, and as a result, this switching station has been proposed to allow the circuits to be switched remotely and without the need to manually interact with the pylons. This will ensure that not only the ability to quickly reset the circuits, but to do so without risk to human life. Just an overview of the site. So here's the switching station. There's the parking, 11 parking spaces along the just north of the main switching station building here. We have the access road there, and then we have some landscape screening to the north and then to the south. The specific impacts of the development are detailed within the officer report. To quickly summarise, this is a rural site and the development, which is very utilitarian in character with galvanised steel fencing, would have a significantly harmful and intrusive impact upon the character and appearance of the area. Users of the footpath, which runs along here, would be particularly impacted upon. The applicant has included a photo montage of views of the application site following completion and in 15 years' time, when the landscaping would hopefully be matured. As you can see, until the landscaping matures, the local area would experience the full force of the development. Even once the landscaping has matured, it can still be viewed. The tops. There's clearly, even with the matured landscaping, there's clearly a presence here where there was none previously. As the officer report has detailed, there are significant national planning policies that weigh heavily in favour of this type of development, and these policies accept that this type of development can only be aesthetically designed as far as possible. However, there are local and national policies which seek to safeguard the character of the countryside. Consideration needs to be made that the impact from this development is relatively local and confined to the immediate area, say 500 to 1,000 metres, and it would have a limited impact on the majority of properties within the area, with perhaps the exception of Riddings which is located behind the pylon. And that property is located here, so it would have a full view of the development, which would be here. However, the landscape impacts need to be weighed against the wider national and regional need for this type of development. The arguments put forward by the applicants regarding the need and assessment of alternative locations are supported by national policy and weigh in favour of the proposals. To reiterate, other locations still result in lengthy and dangerous procedures to manually reset services following power outages, and doing nothing would result in long power outages across large areas of Kent, and again requiring dangerous procedures to reset the power. There are limited design alternatives to reduce the impact of the proposals on the landscape character, and the applicants have sought to mitigate the impacts of the proposal as much as can be accommodated on the small site area. Taking all matters into consideration and balancing those factors that weigh against and those in favour of the proposals, on balance, it has to be considered that the regional and national need to secure a more resilient and effective electricity network in the area, as well as forming a safer network for maintenance staff to operate on, outweighs the landscape harm to the immediate local area, to users of the public right-of-way, and to the dwelling zones regimes, and it is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fletcher. We have two statements submitted, and the first is from Collier Street Parish Council. We reinforce the Parish Council's earlier objections. Sadly, having read the report, it would seem likely that the recommendation is for approval. On the positive side, the report recommends a number of conditions and introduces certain safeguards which do appear to cover some of the concerns raised by neighbours and the Parish Council. The report includes item 203 that the three existing pylons in the area would be removed. However, this does not form part of the application, as these works can be carried out under Class B of the General Permitted Development Order. If NBC planners are minded to approve the application, we would seek a condition ensuring that the three pylons mentioned are demolished within a minimum time frame of 3 months after the station becomes operational. We believe that the removal of the pylons is the only slight planning gain for the community, and they should be removed rather than remain indefinitely. We also are concerned about, from reading the report, of its somewhat inadequate explanation of parking and mess facilities when it is expected that one van should visit the facility once a month. The report does make passing reference to possible increased access should there be a need for an upgrade in the future. Can it be confirmed that there are no plans for this to happen shortly after completion, thereby increasing the size of the facility to the point that it would not have been improved in this application? Pardon me. We then have a lengthy response from UK Power Networks, which I have slightly praised as it runs well over 3 minutes. The project is required to improve network operational flexibility, resilience and safety performance. Due to the high volume of development within the South East, there is an urgent need to reinforce the high voltage network to ensure customer supplies are not interrupted and regulatory requirements are met. If improvement works are not undertaken, the company will fall short of meeting these requirements. Currently, the grid supply point at Northfleet East and Ninfield are separated by broken jumpers at a tower near Marden Junction, where we are planning to install the new switching station. This new switching station will link a number of key supply lines, in particular the flexible double circuit supplying Tunbridge Wells and Pembury runs across a nearby valley, which is prone to lightning strikes, which puts the network at increased risk of a tower failure that will cause a power cut to all customers within the neighbouring area and much further afield. In order to provide alternative supplies, manual intervention would be required to remake the jumpers at Marden. This requires mobilisation of resources, and switching requirements will take a minimum of 8 hours subject to weather conditions which might not be very favourable. This requires the minimum of 6 senior authorised people and teams to make and break jumpers and carry out the switching, as the grid substations are located very far from Marden T. This is to prevent a prolonged loss of power supply to a significant number of customers. And therefore the proposal is to construct a new switching station at Marden T in order to facilitate further remote control switching and eliminate manual interventions as much as possible, which is in the interests of health and safety. We have considered a number of options in coming to this conclusion. First is do nothing, which will put our power supplies at potential long-term outage risk, established a new switching station at Marden T, which is the preferred outcome because it is the most operationally flexible. It addresses safety performance and enhances support for the Tunbridge Wells and the Hartley grid networks, and also links supplies from Northfield Fleet East and Nimfield. We have also looked at establishing a new switching station at Hartley Grid, but that does not present a viable option going forward, and this is the only proposal that can secure regular and uninterrupted power supplies to the best of our ability. This is an infrastructure project which is locationally constrained. There are no other viable options for the client to pursue. The reliability of power supply and distribution is significantly more important with the government's growth agenda and to secure further inward investment to create jobs and homes. This proposal will underline the full potential of economic and social growth for Maidstone and the wider region, and has no material planning considerations weighing against it. We ask you therefore to approve the planning application. And that is from Mr. Dillon of UK Power Networks. Right, I don't see anyone wishing to speak on this application yet. Let's say, Councillor Wilby, have you just indicated, in which case you please carry forward.
My concern was about the visual impact, and even though not detailed in the actual report and on the map, the whole of that field is actually in the ownership of UK Power. Because I've just been on the website and just looked at their ownership, and they actually do detail in the blue outside area. Outside that, it's all in their ownership.
Yes.
So, you know, personally, obviously the impact of this is visual. That's the main issue with this. So there is scope for increased landscaping, and actually an actual gain in biodiversity by actually planting. If they did plant from one end of that boundary all the way across, literally following the path, they would be able to shield it a lot more from the visual impact, but also put a corridor there for actual wildlife.
If you want to propose a condition.
Well, I'd like the officer to come back to say whether that would be a condition we could impose.
Right, Mr. Fletcher or Mr. Bailey, would you like to address that?
I think if I start, Chairman, because obviously this is an application that's been going on for quite some time, and we've had quite a lot of negotiations with the applicant, mainly due to sort of a lack of detailed information, but more latterly on trying to get an enhanced mitigation. And one of the issues we were trying to do was trying to get additional supplemental planting along Sheephurst Lane, you know, along the roadside hedges. But whilst I'm not denying what Councillor will be saying, I don't actually have a look at the ownership details. The applicant was saying to us that they couldn't do the additional landscaping that we were suggesting as part of this application, mainly because of ownership issues and land ownership issues. So we have sought to try to get an enhanced landscaping scheme, but we've come back to the red line of the application site that was submitted with the application. So we have been trying to seek an enhanced landscaping scheme, but the applicant is relying on their landscape visual assessment and their tree planting that they're proposing as part of this scheme.
But the actual on our own planning portal, it shows the blue area that they actually do own. Now, they would be able to plant larger trees further away, which would then cover this eyesore up. It is an eyesore, and don't get me wrong, I know it has to go in. I work in industry with high voltage cables and extremely high voltage on the railway, so I know the safety implications of this. However, I'd be preferred to say defer it so you could go back to applicant to say that we are mindful that this at the moment isn't acceptable because of the harm it does cause to the landscape, and ask you to actually seek in those negotiations for an increased buffer.
Chairman, could I just clarify one point? If I just share my screen, I just think it's important that I'm going to show you the red line with the application that's come in, because obviously we have spent a lot of time trying to get quite significant improvements on this. So members, if you can see my screen in front of you, can I have a yes? You can see it?
Yes, we can see it.
So in terms of the blue land and the red land, obviously the application site, as you can clearly see, is the red land here. The actual land also that the company owns is this blue land. So in terms of the landscaping and the mitigation, they are telling us they've only got this land within this blue area that they could actually include within the landscape mitigation scheme, which is again quite restrictive in terms of where you can include, because I think Councillor Wilby is talking about including landscaping buffering area around here, which is exactly what...
James, I'm not.
Okay, could you just indicate where you're suggesting?
It's just in the blue area. So the issue was raised about coming along the footpath, which runs to the south of that site, I believe.
Yeah.
So if this was planted up along this southern side, you've got two patches of woodland either end of this field. It would be a biodiversity gain, and you'd shield more of it because the smaller trees would be close to the people. So you would actually get a better service or a better scheme. Sorry, not service.
Okay, so just to be clear, because we've got landscaping, the case officer's presentation showed landscaping along this boundary to the north, and it also showed a similar landscaping belt to the southern boundary across here. So
it showed it more around just around the outside of the fence, to be honest. It didn't really, I don't think really impacted on it. But if we could get that whole area planted up, James, I think that would be of a gain.
Can I just jump in there? That area is planted. If I just share my screen, it's within the. Bear with me.
Sorry, members. I think this is an important point because obviously, as we're quite aware, the landscaping is critical to this scheme.
So the landscaping is within their the applicant's topography report, which is mentioned in one of the conditions. I think it is mentioned in the landscaping condition. There's landscaping to the north of the switching station and then to the south of it, which, I mean, that's...
Okay, that's fine. Obviously, you don't normally use grey as a landscaping corridor. But
no, I appreciate that. I mean, I mean, within the topography, it is labelled as landscaping.
Okay, is that what you had in mind, Paul, at the start?
That was, yeah. I'll be honest. Sorry for wasting members' time, but that's not.
No, no, you haven't. You haven't. It was important to make sure. Just a point, James, while we're discussing this. Is there anything we can do to actually ensure the existing pylons actually do get removed, or do we just have to leave that to good faith?
Just on that point, I'm glad you raised that, Clive, because what the report slightly omitted is, yes, they're taking down 3 pylons, and I think if I could just show this screen again just very quickly, because this plan in front of you makes it a bit clearer exactly what you're looking at. What they're also proposing, so you'll see a plan coming up in front of you. These are the pylons that are being proposed to be removed. They are outside the red line boundary.
Oh, right, okay.
And there are also overhead lines that are proposing to be removed. But we need to add that where you can see these green areas here, they are proposing to put up new pylons, which effectively look in terms of this area, which are very similar to the pylon that they're putting up in the centre of the site. So whilst there is, I presume you could look at it, there is some net gain by losing the higher pylons. They are placing these ones, the green dots, they're putting new pylons back up, but as I said, they can do that under their permitted development right. So that's not for members to consider, but it's important that members kind of know as part of the overall scheme, I think.
No, I think it was, as the parish council mentioned it, I think we did need to actually, at least.
So hopefully that explains members the clarity, because, there's lots of other stuff that they're doing, removing, burying overhead lines underground. But again, as I said, they're not forming part of the application. And it's, the officers' reports try to sort of stay clear out of that. Otherwise, you didn't want members to get sort of mixed messages in terms of what is part of the application, what isn't.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Can we now turn to members? With that explanation, I hope we can move forward with some dispatch, but I do have a fair number of people wishing to speak. Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I may have missed this in the statement from UK Power, but why does it need a mess room when it's only visited once a month? Seems completely unnecessary to me.
I think this is I think the once a month is if everything's going right and they don't need to do any works on it. And they're actually saying in a report, which I read out, representation, that if they do have to do any works on it, it can take up to 8 hours with a substantial crew.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Powell.
Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine was a similar question to Councillor Atkinson's, which was why do they need 11 car parking spaces as it's only going to be visited by one person once a month? I know there's something on the report that mentions otherwise, but it just seems strange that it's a specific 11 spaces.
I think that's because they were talking about 2 teams of 5 people, plus the person who's already on the site, I suppose. So, that would be not a normal circumstance. But I think what they're saying is they have to cater for that happening if the lightning strikes in the Medway Valley or something.
Yeah, or maybe that justifies the mess room as well then. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
If you have to be on site for 8 hours, you're going to need one.
Yes. Thank you.
Councillor Brindle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 small points. Is it possible, and I'm looking at the difference between the planting and the planting after 15 years, is it possible to ask, as in a condition, to have more mature hedge planting from the outset so that it doesn't take 15 years to get further up the pylon and the buildings? Second point, we're agreeing that they can have a 10-year management plan. Is that long enough? They're my questions, please.
Fair questions. I'll just take Councillor Vizard in case he has any questions as well.
It wasn't a question. A lot of it had been addressed by Paul a little while ago, but it's only a comment on the very stark appearance of the galvanised fencing that's there. With negotiation with the officers, could it not be negotiated that possibly the plasticised sort of green fencing would have been put there, and then obviously it takes some of the starkness away?
Mr. Fletcher or Mr. Bailey, would you like to answer those 3 points, please?
William, if you start off and I'll follow up if there's anything that needs to be followed up. While William's doing that, maybe if I just start with the mature planting. I think, members could ask for that. and we could put that as a condition generally in terms of planting schemes to ensure the success. And I think it's vitally important that we get as minimalist failure as possible. We normally start with smaller whips so they can become established in the ground, and then they've got a better chance of success. But members could do, if they want a slightly a more mature planting, I could liaise with the landscape officer to try and suggest that, so members could give that delegation to us to secure in negotiation with the landscape officer what size of planting would be appropriate in this location. And in terms of the 10-year management plan, I think members will know we normally secure a 5-year management plan. That's normally what's considered reasonable. We've pushed that to a 10-year because of obviously the mitigation and the 15-year planting scheme. I think if you were to push that to 15 years,
it's pushing it.
I think it's pushing it. We've tried to push it to the maximum that we would normally do on a scheme like this for 10 years. And maybe if William could answer back on the green fencing. I'm just checking the conditions, whether it's in there.
I was just going to say, I don't think it is conditioned. Is it possible to do that, James, with a condition?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, I think if that's members' field, because obviously there's going to be a 15-year time while that landscaping is maturing. So I think if members feel that's reasonable, I would certainly say it meets the tests.
Fine, then we'll do that then, unless anyone objects. Councillor Perry?
No, I'll be very quick. James answered my question. It's about the pylons, and I think he's answered it very thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Very briefly then, last point again goes to Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, going back to condition 5, it says use predominantly native or near native species. I think they should be 100%. And also we should be insisting on non-plastic guards for the trees and hedges, and obviously condition 6, add in bee bricks as well. So,
you're not going to insist on no sycamores this time?
Well, yeah, good point. Good point. Thank you. Yeah, no sycamores again. Well done. Thanks.
We're going to have to get you a medal for the campaign against sycamores or something.
Thank you. I deserve it.
Right. Is everyone clear exactly what's been proposed in the recommendation then?
Chair, can I hate to raise this, condition 5, where you did say all native, I'm just pointing out that the landscape character assessment supplement doesn't actually say all, it says predominantly, because obviously it does allow that there are occasions where non-native may be appropriate. So you're careful because of what the landscape character assessment guidelines says. It doesn't prohibit non-native.
Well, just take out the word predominantly.
Okay. Okay, point taken.
Okay, on that basis, then I formally move the recommendation, as I don't think it's been done as amended, and as seconded by Councillor Wilby, and I will therefore ask Mr. Fitzpatrick to take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman, I'm sorry, before we take the vote, can we just confirm the length of the landscaping scheme?
10 years.
10 years, thank you.
Debbie, are you ready for me?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Atkinson?
4.
Councillor Brindle?
4.
Councillor English?
4.
Councillor Kimmans?
4.
Councillor Munford?
4.
Councillor Perry?
4.
Councillor Powell?
4.
Councillor Spooner?
4.
Councillor Vizard?
4.
Councillor Wilby?
4.
Councillor Young?
4.
Thank you very much. What's the total, please, Mrs. Sneak?
That's 11-4, none against, no abstentions. So
Thank you very much.
unanimous,
That's
Chairman.
clearly passed then. We move on to the last application with any speakers this evening, which is Oakland's Lenham Road, Headcorn, Ashford. Item 22, page 183. I ask the officer to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen.
Members considered 4 applications for Martin's Gardens at the meeting on the 1st of October. 3 of these applications were approved. However, a decision on the final application for Oaklands was deferred. The reason for deferral was to establish whether the new entrance to Oaklands from Lenham Road, which on the aerial photograph is on the bottom left-hand corner, was actually immune, whether it was immune from enforcement action. This immunity from enforcement action was in terms of whether the separate entrance has been present for more than 4 years. So that would be November 2016. Officers have looked at the photographic evidence in the form of Google Maps, the council's own records. However, these are inconclusive in establishing when the entrance was actually constructed. Notwithstanding the lack of photographic evidence, a council officer has stated that they are willing to provide a sworn statement to say that the entrance was not present in January 2017. So that's 2 months short of the required 4 years. The entrance forms part of the current application, and the applicant has indicated that they are not prepared to remove the entrance, and in their view the entrance has been present for more than 4 years. The one application is for 1 additional mobile home and 1 additional touring caravan. These units are additional to those permitted in 2009, but the same number of units as permitted in August last year. On the aerial photograph, obviously the Oakland site is outlined in red, and the other plots 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 are across the site on the right-hand side. The image shows the separate access in the bottom left-hand corner. Just outside the site, on the right-hand side, is the access to the other units in Martin's Gardens. On this aerial, you can see the existing caravans at the back of the site as well. Just moving on, this is a photograph looking from the front of the site. The proposed landscape buffer is in the location of the fence. You can see there with the caravans behind. In terms of the earlier approved scheme, on the left-hand side is the 2009 approval. 1 and 2 are existing retained mobile and a utility block, and 3 and 4 the proposed mobile and tourer. And in terms of the current proposed layout, 4 and 5 are the retained utility and mobile, with 6 and I think it's 7 are the proposed tourer and mobile. There were currently the two access points from Lenham Road. The first serves the current application site, and the second serving the other 5 plots. Current application seeks permission for the same number of caravans for the retention of the existing access arrangements. The applicant has stated that the separate access needs to be retained, as caravans leaving the site to be serviced can't use the other access point. Whilst there are other entrances on both sides of Lenham Road, it is also accepted, and as in line with the concerns that members expressed at the last meeting, that the second entrance does have a negative visual impact. But notwithstanding that negative impact, that has to be balanced against the positive benefits of this proposal, including the landscape buffer across the middle of the site, the rewilding of the land at the back of the site, and officers consider that those benefits outweigh the harmful impact of the new entrance. The officer recommendation is to approve, subject to planning conditions. Members are advised that The planning conditions which were imposed in terms of the other plots, details have been submitted from the applicant in terms of the landscaping on those other plots. So those details are in with council and currently being assessed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. We have one statement submitted, which is from Oakhurst Parish Council. The Parish Council would like to see this application refused. The grounds are stated with all the other plots at Martin Gardens includes insufficient information on the applicant, the visual harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, effects upon the local community in terms of noise and light pollution. However, we have to accept that it is inevitable that this plot will be granted permission. In view of this, we would ask that the committee strongly consider the conditions to be placed upon the site. When an identical planning application was submitted in December 2018, this committee insisted that one of the conditions in granting a planning permission was the closing up of the access and reinstating of the mixed hedgerow which had been ripped out. The report said the access constructed to Lenham Road and the associated gate, brick pier and timber boarded front boundary is visually incongruous and intrusive in the roadside view. They have a harmful impact on the rural character of the road and the visual amenity on the road generally. It is considered that the removal and closure of the existing separate access on Lenham Road and the approval and implementation of a robust scheme of native species tree and hedgerow planting to the site frontage will significantly mitigate the visual impact of the mobile home plot. We do not understand why the recommendation is now for approval of the access, completely at odds with what was in the previous planning report. The statement that the brick piers, timber boarding and gates are in keeping with a rural landscape is extraordinary. This is a rural road in an area of landscape value. In view of the damage wreaked at this site with the destruction of ancient woodland, the applicant surely has a duty to reinstate as much of the woodland hedgerows and pond areas as possible. We ask that the committee recommend conditions which reinstate the woodland, hedgerow and pond. The access be removed and replaced with native planting. And in view of what happened with the last set of conditions placed on the previous planning applications, that these be rigorously applied and monitored. And that was Councillor Kennard, Chairman of Oakhurst Parish Council. I am seeing an indication, I think, from Councillor Mumford.
Yeah, we've already spent a long time on this application. In reading the report and listening to what the parish council has said, I agree with the parish council. We got to a point where we had agreed most of the detail here, apart from the entrance. I've read the report about the entrance, and I think we insist on the conditions and as we was going forward, except the rewilding, the landscape, etc. But we insist under condition or whatever way that access is closed, that we then do planting along there. And that's where I am with this after spending so long last time speaking about the landscaping. The only thing that we got stuck on was this entrance. Having read this report, I think we should stick to our guns, and I believe we can, and if necessary, enforcement action. That's where I am with it.
Okay, I think that's going to be quite a commonly held view. So can I check with Mr. Bailey, I think, whether we can do that?
Yeah, I suppose the issue settles on. I don't think you can impose a condition. The applicant is clearly saying that access is part and parcel of, although I note it's not in the description, it just says siting of one additional home and one number additional tourer. So it's not actually in the description of development, which
is why I was thinking we might actually be able to do it.
Which I note, but we do know that access is part and parcel, because obviously by looking at the red line boundary plan you can see what they're applying for. So they are actually applying for that access. If members are going to put a condition on, that condition is not going to be complied with, and I suppose on the basis of where we sit, I suppose what's in front of members tonight is, I can clearly hear members saying they don't like the access. There is an option open to members to refuse it purely on the access, but I'd need a very clear indication that the rest of the scheme is considered acceptable And then obviously the matters would have to rest as to whether enforcement action is taken along the access only. I just would add a sort of a cautionary word on that, is because obviously, you know, there is a separate process to go through down in enforcement, but when or if an enforcement notice is served, it would normally include the red line of the application site, and if it only relates to the access and doesn't relate to anything else, then by default powers, in effect, a planning permission is granted on the basis if it's not mentioned in the enforcement notice. So obviously what then prevails is the obviously discretion is open up to the planning inspectorate, you know, depending on if the inspector decides to approve the scheme, because obviously you've got a ground A appeal under an enforcement notice. It's up to the inspector to see whether they impose the condition. So I'm just making members fully aware that obviously, you know, the officers in this report have balanced the visual harm against the benefits that arise from this scheme in terms of relocating it and pushing it effectively that area at the back and rewilding that area. I'm not saying that the inspector might have the same view, and that's assuming that the public interest test excuse me, is passed to serve the notice. Does that explain kind of where we sit, Chairman? Because I don't think it's just a question of saying put a condition on to close the access off, because clearly the applicant is relying on that application, and I'm a bit, you know, I'm wondering why the application does not include in the access in the description, because it is required, and if we're saying it's 4 years, it's operational works. But notwithstanding that, we can't force an applicant to apply something, because you know we have to agree descriptions with the applicant as per the MPPG guidance. But clearly the option is available to members, knowing that the access is required as part of this application.
Okay, fine. I think I understand that. Councillor Wilby.
Yeah, I'm a bit lost for words, to be honest. I sat on I was on planning committee back when this first came forward, after obviously the issue about going to the ancient woodland. We are not gaining anything here. As this report states, we are not gaining anything. They've deliberately gone into ancient woodland, which they shouldn't have gone into in their original plan application. So we're not actually gaining anything here. We're repairing the damage that has happened. And I find it hard to believe. I find it quite astonishing that 2 years ago he was quite happy to move the gate and the caravans could get in and out with no problem, and now they've got a problem. So I'm with Steve Mumford on this. We should, you know, if we can't do it as a condition, then we should refuse it.
Okay, I think that's. Did you actually propose that, Councillor Mumford, or is that? No, I think Councillor Wilby's proposing that. Is that seconded?
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we refuse.
Okay, fine. Right, I'm going to take Councillor Powell, and then I'm going to. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, no, I was just following on. I think when you actually look at it from this kind of aerial shot, that the place is gradually being destroyed. I mean, it's taken away everything that we gave permission on in the first place, and to suggest that if there isn't something that's in the application, then we shouldn't really be, you know, giving it our judgment tonight. So therefore, I'm quite happy to support the members that wish to reject this application.
Councillor Spooner, and then we will wrap this up unless I hear dissenting voices at this point.
Yeah, I entirely agree with Councillor Mumford and Councillor Wilby. I see nothing wrong with the actual siting of the one mobile home and the 2 parking spaces, but it is this other access which sticks out like a sore thumb. And I'm all for refusing it and saying that we will, perhaps with an informative, saying that we will be prepared to accept an application which deletes that access, and that access is in breach of planning control. I
think I would just say the informative says something like broadly the rest of the application is acceptable without going into what we might or might not do in enforcement, which is a separate process.
And if we can get the sworn statements from our two witnesses saying that access was not there less than 4 years ago, we should have a good case.
Okay, well, I think the informative, I think, would be acceptable to the councillors who moved the motion. In the general terms, saying that we didn't have a problem with the actual application, it's just the access.
Yeah, anything that we can do to preserve the agreement we've already got with the landscaping and it moving forward and protecting the ancient woodland, we should put into our refusal and make sure that it is only the access. We don't want to lose what we've gained.
There's still a risk, but it limits it so far as we can. On that basis, then I will now move to a vote on the motion as proposed. If we mind taking the vote, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Chairman,
can we just clarify the wording, please, for the refusal?
The wording, please. And I need Tony and possibly James to confirm that they're happy with that.
Yes, so the wording is along the lines that the landscape impact and of the access constructed to Lenham Road, the associated gate and paraphernalia is visually incongruous, intrusive in the landscape, has a harmful impact on the rural character of the road and the visual amenity.
That's fine. I think
contrary
that's
to SP 17.
Yes, thank you, Steve.
I think you can also probably add DM30 as well.
Yes, thank you.
Well, and I think you're also adding the DM15 because this is a DM Egyptian traveller site, and part of it is the landscape character. So you're saying that it's harmful to DM15 as well. I think that's, to answer the legal officers, I think that's sort of a reasonable stance to take, members, and I concur with the informative to add to give clarity to what is acceptable and what isn't.
Thank you very much. And in that case, we will now proceed to the vote. Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right, Councillor Atkinson.
4.
Councillor Brindle.
I'm confused now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We're refusing the application.
Oh,
that's
4.
the motion.
4.
English.
4.
Councillor Kimmins.
4.
Councillor Munford.
4.
Councillor Perry.
4.
Councillor Powell.
4.
Councillor Spooner.
4.
Councillor Vizard.
4.
Councillor Wilby.
4.
Councillor Young.
4.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, that exhausts the applications for speakers. If we get a move on, we might finish this meeting without an adjourned discussion. So moving on to Greenacre, Church Hill.
Sorry, Chairman, just before we do the voting of that, it's 11 for and against, no abstentions. So that was refused.
My apologies, I was getting carried away with enthusiasm there. Thank you. We move on to Greenacre, Church Hill, Bolton, Montrosy. I believe that the parish council and ward members are content with this. Does anyone else want this report introduced? No, in that case, I'll move the recommendation on the papers.
I'll second that.
Is that agreed, member?
Agreed.
Chairman, can we do the vote, please?
No, well, we don't really need to if everyone said agreed, but if you absolutely insist, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Greenacre, Mr. Atkinson.
4.
Councillor Brindle.
4.
Councillor English.
4.
Councillor Kimmins.
4.
Councillor Munford.
4.
Councillor Perry.
4.
Councillor Powell.
4.
Councillor Spooner.
4.
Councillor Vizard.
Keeping someone up.
Councillor Vizard.
4.
Councillor Wilby.
4.
And Councillor Young.
4.
Thank you very much. And that was unanimous, I believe.
That's right.
It was,
Thank you.
Chairman, yes. Thank you.
Right, moving on rapidly to land near 87 Lombardy Drive, which is a tree preservation order. Does anyone wish to speak to this application, this TPO? In that case, I'll move the recommendation to approve on the papers. Is that seconded?
Yeah, seconded, Councillor Commands.
Thank you. If you take the vote, please, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Atkinson.
For.
Councillor Brindle.
I'm not taking part in this one as I'm a member of Boxley Parish Council.
Of course, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor English.
For.
Councillor Commands.
For.
Councillor Munford.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor Vizard.
For.
Councillor Wilby.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For.
Oh, and that was everyone, apart from, of course, Councillor Young.
What? No, apart from Councillor
Brindle. Councillor Brindle, sorry.
So that was 10 in favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, and finally, in that terms of applications, 14 Faraday Road, Penardon Heath, Maidstone. Is anyone wishing to see this introduced?
Chairman, it needs to be introduced because it's the applicant is related to a member of staff.
Oh, of course. In that case, very briefly, can we have the report introduced, please?
Sure. Bear with me. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. The application seeks the demolition of the existing garage/utility room and the erection of a two-storey side and rear extensions, including a raised patio to the rear. Beginning with the side extension, this projects from the side elevation by 2.3 metres, which is well under half the width of the existing dwelling house, which has a width of 10.5 metres. In terms of subservience, the development is not set down from the main roof line. It does match the hipped roof form, and where it is set to the side of the existing front projection, it appears substantially set back at 3 metres from the front elevation. It is considered that the development retains the character and appearance of the existing dwelling, and it is not an addition that would overwhelm the character of the dwelling as it exists. When viewed from the front, it is only a relatively small addition in comparison to the rest of the dwelling. Moving on to the rear, this element projects less than half the depth of the existing dwelling and has a matching roof form as the existing dwelling. In terms of scale, whilst it is larger than the existing roof projection, it would appear as the main rear addition, with the existing element appearing as a subservient addition. As this element is located to the rear, its impact on the wider street scene would be very limited. Moving on to neighbouring impact, the two neighbouring properties that could be impacted upon the development are 12 and 16 Faraday Road, which are located 1.5 metres to the north and 1 metre south of 14 Faraday Road. When considering the existing built form, it is not considered that any detrimental overshadowing would occur to number 16. Whilst a slight impact upon number 12 may occur from over the top of the development, no impact would occur from around it. No windows are proposed that would cause a loss of privacy. The development does not seek to increase the number of bedrooms within the property, and as such it is not considered that the development would have a detrimental impact upon parking in the area. The applicant has submitted a biodiversity plan which indicates that a brushwood nest for birds, a hedgehog house and a stourhead bat box would all be placed within the rear garden. It is considered that these are helpful additions to the application. Conditions will be imposed requiring that these enhancements be implemented. In conclusion, it is considered that the development is a well-designed subservient addition to the dwelling that would not have a detrimental impact upon the host dwelling or the character and appearance of the area, nor would it harm the amenity of neighbouring properties or impact upon parking in the area. As such, it is not considered that there are any policy grounds to refuse the application, and a permission subject to conditions is recommended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone wishing to speak to it? Oh, in that case, I'll move the recommendation.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, of course you can, Councillor.
Thanks. I know it's an extension, but for an extension, can we also agree swift baton B bricks? And can we also insist on electric vehicle charging points? That last one's more a question than anything, but I'd like to see the B bricks, etc., put in for sure. Thank you.
Yes, a B brick would be a good idea. We may have addressed the other issues. Can the officer come back on that, please?
I'm sure we can condition the B bricks. Maybe James can comment on the electrical charging point, as it's not a new dwelling.
Yeah, I think that would be, it's an extension to an existing dwelling. I think that would be pushing the reasonableness of the condition to the full extent. Means we'd have to start applying that to every extension property we had, and I don't think that would be reasonable, and I don't think it'd be reasonable in this instance, members.
No, I think you're right, but we're happy to accept the minor amendment in relation to B bricks in the. Do I have a seconder to move that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Mumford. Did you want to say anything, or can we move to a vote?
Move to a vote.
Thank you very much. If you would take the vote, please, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for 14 Faraday Road. Councillor Atkinson?
4.
Councillor Brindle?
4.
Councillor English?
4.
Councillor Commence?
4.
Councillor Munford?
4.
Councillor Perry? 4. Councillor Powell?
4.
Councillor Spooner?
4.
Councillor Blizzard?
4.
Councillor Wilby?
4.
Councillor Young?
4.
Thank you very much, and numbers for that.
It's 11 in favour, Chairman. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. All these controversial votes. All right, we move on to the final substantial item of this evening, which is Pilgrims Retreat, Hog Barn Lane. The recommendation is on your screen. Just to say very briefly, a lot of members and officers have been working very hard to try and resolve this tricky situation. I feel personally, and speaking for myself here, that we have made some progress. Therefore, it's not unreasonable to look at this recommendation on the papers. As long as we continue to make progress, we should be looking to try and make sure that we actually do have enough of a window to do it within. But this is not going to be a process of infinitely extending. If further progress is not forthcoming, we will have to move forward with enforcement. Mr. Bailey, did you wish to comment further?
No, I think I would concur with what the chairman said. A lot of work has gone into that, members of the steering group, and I think we're moving forward with it. I have been kind of informed by the applicant that an application is likely to be forthcoming. I think that could be positive in terms of a lot of the issues that members have been putting forward. I won't go into detail what they are at this time, but I am hopeful that an application will be forthcoming quite soon, and I'm hopefully that we won't need this 3-month full extension. But yes, as I said, I think it's looking more positive. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, I'm not going to take massive debates on this, but I will take the members who've indicated so far. Councillor Wilby, I think you've indicated first, and then I've got Councillor Powell.
I'm happy to propose what's on the papers, Chairman. However, though, I would say that I'm still seeing plots coming up for sale.
Yes.
Site, which I thought there was a...
there's an injunction in place.
So I'd just like to bring that to the officer's attention. But apart from that, I'm happy to propose what's on the papers.
Councillor Powell, did you wish to speak? Sorry?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's only that I was lobbied by a member of the parish council at Harwich earlier on today, just to say that at the moment on this particular site, there are 19 official residential properties. Should anything happen whereby there will be some 200 eventually, if this all goes to to whatever plan, can those numbers be added to the housing list as part of the review of the local plan? And I just wonder whether this committee would be in a position to be able to ask that question to SPI or whoever.
Well, I don't think the committee needs to officially ask it, but it is a question that we should appropriately address to Mr. Coyne. And I'm quite happy to send that inquiry off on the committee's behalf.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will formally second the recommendation on the papers that's been moved by Councillor Wilby. Councillor Mumford and Kim Manson, and I'm not taking any further discussion. Councillor Mumford.
Right, very quickly, the water councillors from Harwich have asked me to let you know they're in full agreement of this and thank the officers for what they've done so far.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you. Councillor Kim Manson.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mr. Bailey whether he thinks that the 3 months is going to be enough, because obviously because of COVID and everything else, is this going to be enough of an extension, or is there going to be a further extension?
I'm not open to a further extension, and I don't think the members of the working group were, unless there's an absolute dire emergency situation. Mr. Bailey,
I would concur. This report is on behalf of the steering group. I'm doing what the steering group requests, so this is coming from members. As I said, I am hopeful that an application will be coming forward, but everything that's been negotiated is on behalf of the steering group and on behalf of yourselves as the planning committee.
Yes, we are not, as I said in the brief introduction, and for the sake of the reason I was doing the introduction is this is the steering group's report rather than an officer's report. Although the officers have done a lot of work, is that we are not looking to a bit more. This is an extension for very sound reasons, but we are partly because some time was indeed lost at the beginning because of COVID-19, but also because there's been significant progress. But what we can't have is just a bit more progress and another 6 months, then just a bit more progress, then another 6 months. It needs to be resolved. Okay, so I'm going to put the report to the committee. All those in favour, please, would they indicate in a normal fashion? Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Atkinson.
For.
Brindle. Councillor Brindle.
For.
Councillor English.
For.
Councillor Kimmins.
For.
Councillor Munford.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor Vizard.
Agreed. For, sorry.
Councillor Wilby.
For.
Councillor Young.
For.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That resolution is passed unanimously, I believe. Mrs. Snook, is that correct?
That's correct. 11 in favour, none against, no abstentions.
Thank you very much. Now we turn to a very full set of appeal decisions. If anyone has anything, officers or members have anything to say, I'll just briefly note that generally it's quite a satisfactory set of outcomes, generally speaking. Quite a lot of them, quite a lot of decisions. Mr. Bailey, anything you want to say on that?
Nothing further, Chair. I think it continues how we're doing on our appeals, over the 70% on average for the appeals. I think it continues, the good decision making that's being made across the board.
Yes, congratulations to all officers who've been defending appeals successfully. Congratulations, long may it continue. Members and officers, and indeed members of the public who contributed various ways, thank you very much for your input this evening and for your discipline. We will not need an adjourned meeting. Well done.
Well chaired, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Well, I did make one mistake.